And welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. Good to be back here in the saddle today. Joe Rexrode, what's going on? How we doing?
Yeah. Is my mic on?
Hello?
It's on.
It's on.
It's my headphones.
There you go.
There we go. Good. Doing great. Had a good weekend, including Ryan Port's wedding. That was a great event. Good times, some music, some dancing. Katie Rexrode got to sit next to Jared Stillman and hear amazing takes for hours on end.
She did.
I can't really think of anything better.
No, can't think of anything better either. And then even with when the house band got up there, they even played a Blink-182 song just for you, which I know you enjoyed thoroughly.
They played a few country tunes, which were, like I said, live country. It's fine. Good stuff. And then, the Blink-182. I mean, they didn't play Creed, so
they did not.
They didn't quite hit the full gamut of wonderful music. But no, they were good. The Outliers.
Yeah.
Good band. I guess they normally play on Broadway. Got them down to the wedding, so that was good. But Porth, I thought, was great. Ryan and Amanda had a great time, bride and groom. So, congrats to them.
Congrats to them. It's a wonderful weekend, and Ryan Porth, not with us this week. He is down in Florida on the honeymoon. So, hope they have a great time down there, and we'll see them when they get back. But as you said, Joe, just a fun weekend. It was fun to be a part of. We enjoyed it. Lots of representation there from the station as well, so it was good.
It was. Yeah, absolutely. Great, good. My wife also, got to hang out with Pete Weber, talk a little bit like Buffalo area, northern Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York area stuff. So that was good. Talking about where you can get good Kimmelweck here. So we got the spot now.
Okay.
So that's exciting. Also, we went rented a boat with in-laws on Sunday, and I immediately crashed the boat.
Did you really?
Yep. I mean, I didn't I didn't destroy the boat,
right?
But I immediately somehow I don't know how many adults are on this boat. 7?
Jeez.
7 adults.
Okay.
Somehow no one had ever. I'm not a boater.
Sure.
Okay. So somehow I got left to drive the boat, and it's at Percy Priest, and I'm coming out of the thing, and there's no control whatsoever of the boat, and I immediately bang into. And there's all these people looking, and I'm melting down. I don't know how to drive a boat. So
what did you do?
Actually, Katie said, move over, and got us out of there. And then my brother-in-law brought it in and crashed the boat coming in.
There you
because
go.
It's impossible to control these things. These pontoons, it was like a double slide so the kids could go up the slides.
Yeah.
They don't respond. They're fine in open water. But, I'm just saying, all these companies, you should have the little tugboat thing, okay? Some do, some don't.
Yeah.
But, hey, the deposit all came back.
Well, that's good. And no damage was done. So it works out.
Yeah, and it must happen a lot, right?
You would think so.
I'm gonna tell myself that it happens a lot.
I'm gonna say you're probably right.
I mean,
Did you go down the water slide? That's the main question.
Oh, you better believe it.
Attaboy. That's how it's done.
Absolutely. I put 240 on that thing and said, hey, let's give it a roll. We've already smashed into another boat. And, flew down and good times.
Elijah Campbell, how was your weekend? What went on?
A lot of moving boxes, furniture, a 4-year-old's birthday party.
Oh, that sounds fun.
It was off the chain.
There you go. That sounds great.
So what, you're helping, family move?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was helping someone move out of their house this week in East Nashville. And,
that's an all-day affair, my friend.
It was an all-day, 24-hour affair. That was what my Sunday consisted of: moving furniture, moving boxes, making 1,000 trips to and from East Nashville. So it was busy.
There you go. Well, I hope everybody had a great weekend. Glad to be back in here today, and we are off and running on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. And Joe, today is June 1st, and we've been waiting on June 1st for a while now. Number one, it's hard to believe that it's June, but number two, June 1st, a significant day in the NFL as well. We'll get to that a little bit more coming up next. But also Julio Jones stuff. continuing to bubble up over the weekend, and the Titans continuing to be connected to Julio Jones. There was a report, I believe, on either Saturday or Sunday coming out from Pro Football Talk, and specifically from Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk, talking about Julio Jones and how the Titans are the perceived favorites to land Julio Jones. And in his piece, Florio says, quote, "In league circles, the current expectation is that eventually the Falcons will send Jones to the Titans for a second-round pick. This isn't a report the Titans have offered or will offer a second-round pick, or that the Falcons will take a second-round pick for Jones. They continue to want a first-rounder for Jones, with the Falcons contributing nothing to his salary in 2021 or 2022. This is simply a reflection of the current thinking among folks in the know about where this is all likely to end up. The widespread belief is that the Titans will get Jones for a second-round pick. It further undercuts the ESPN report that the Falcons have had a 2022 first-round pick on the table for Jones. It's possible, however, that ESPN's report was incomplete." So what do you think of all this coming from Mike Florio?
More and more, ESPN's report sounds like the Falcons saying that.
Yes, it does.
When it's like, well, okay, well, if you had a first-round pick, why didn't you jump on that, right?
You would think the conversation would be pretty much over.
I mean, yeah, the first-round pick and them not take on, come on, it's not happening. And that's interesting that Florio has in. So basically, other people around the league are doing what we're doing, which is speculating. Like, yeah, I bet you the Titans get him for a second rounder. Oh well, okay. It's a report.
Yeah,
like Peter King had he had his, which is always excellent. His it's not called Monday Morning Quarterback anymore, is it? Or is it?
I think it is.
Okay, it's called
MMQB.
Is it called MMQB?
Yeah, it's MMQB. Yeah,
SI kept the. Didn't they keep the branding, or they just call it something else now?
I think Peter King was allowed to move the branding.
Well, because Albert Breer, they still basically do the same thing. But anyway, for NBC Sports,
right,
his report, and he wrote I wouldn't be surprised if this were true. So I saw a lot of reaction to that, and it's like, okay, I could see that happening. Okay, great.
People take that as all righty,
right?
Here he comes.
Mean, it's not him reporting that it's happening. I mean. And, so I think certainly it's real, it's possible, but I'd still, Titans fans, I would still brace yourself for a real strong possibility it doesn't happen, that he goes somewhere else. I mean, that's the Falcons' only hope here, is that they've got this competitive market of teams that are, and it starts to build like, okay, we really want this guy. All right, okay, we'll come to here now. Oh, they're going to here, we'll come to here now. I mean, that's the only hope. If the Titans were to trade a second-round pick and take on the whole thing, I mean, that's a big cost.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can't sit here and say no way. I can't sit here and say that they shouldn't do that.
Now, there was also a report from Diana Rossini over the weekend that the Falcons obviously continuing to field calls from interesting teams, and that the Seahawks have had discussions about a possible trade with the Falcons for Julio Jones, and that even Russell Wilson and Julio Jones have been in touch talking about the conversation or the possibility of playing together in Seattle. So, look, you're going to hear a lot of this until he gets traded. I'm sure that he's had a conversation with a lot of people at this point about the possibility of playing for Julio Jones. It keeps being fascinating to me, Joe, about how, whether it's A.J. Brown that we're talking about here or, Russell Wilson in Seattle, that we keep having conversations about, Julio Jones has talked to so-and-so about playing for their team. Like, it's going to end up being Julio Jones' decision at the end of the day. This is very fascinating to me.
Yeah.
That this continues to happen.
Right. Now, it's funny. This is also like the media being used.
Yes.
Not that they haven't had a discussion or that it's inaccurate, but again, that reads to me like, hey, other teams, are you listening to this? Because Russell and Julio are talking, and Seattle might be in this thing for real. So I thought Gentry Estes had it. We're going to have him on the show later. He had a tweet yesterday, and it was a good point. The second-round pick for the Titans thing also sounds like the Falcons saying, hey, just so all of you know, first-round pick gets him.
Yeah.
Titans second, but you can get them for a first. And also, again, I mean, in the AFC, it's like, hey, Ravens, hey, Colts, do you want them on the Titans? Hey, Titans, do you want them on the Colts? I mean, it's all, so I feel like the Falcons are doing some work right now in terms of trying to get this market going. And maybe someone will come to the first-round pick thing, but, man, no way if they aren't taking on some of that money. I mean, I think that would be insane. Now, I say no way, and we see NFL GMs do stupid things all the time, so – I'm just saying no way should it be done, not that it won't be done.
Well, and today is kind of the kickstart of the real discussion starting to happen, right? I mean, it's June 1st. They've talked about he's not going to be traded before June 1st, and here we are where salary cap considerations become a little bit easier after June 1st, and just the money is able to work. I think I saw somewhere like the difference between trading for Julio Jones before June 1st and after June 1st is somewhere in the neighborhood of like $15 million of dead money.
Right, because you can split it now.
Yeah,
you can split and put stuff on the next year now after June 1st. So you don't take the whole hit for this year's cap. So yeah, I mean his situation and others now are going to be, we're going to see some stuff happening. We're going to see some also players be cut because the dead money difference. So I mean, there's going to be a lot of movement now. So the NFL, again, managing to be the top of the news cycle.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're good at that.
They've got it figured out.
They do, and we'll see if we start to see some movement today when it comes to that. We are off and running today here on Robby and Rexrode, taking your thoughts on Julio Jones, potentially to the Titans on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we'll continue this discussion, and as far as the money for the Titans, is there a simple solution to making the money work for Julio Jones? We'll talk about that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts on Julio Jones, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And, Joe, a big part of this conversation that we've had surrounding Julio Jones is, okay, if it's the Titans and they're interested in Julio Jones, number one, what's the compensation that you're giving up? And number two, how can you make this work from a financial standpoint, bringing Julio Jones into the mix? And as we know, Michael Giannetti, who is the co-founder, editor of Spot Rack, he had an interesting tweet over the weekend that says, quote, "A simple base salary restructure for quarterback Ryan Tannehill without void years would free up $15.6 million of 2021 cap space for the Titans, almost exactly enough to get Julio Jones' full current cap hit at 15.3 in the door should a trade be finalized." So saying here that a very simple move of just restructuring Ryan Tannehill could free up $15.6 million of 2021 cap space for the Titans, and there's the money right there for Julio Jones. Joe, is it as simple as that? And what would you think about restructuring Ryan Tannehill this year to make room for Julio Jones?
Again, with any discussion like this, so it's not that they're then getting rid of that money. No. It means they are strapping themselves down the road. But sure, I mean that's the number. I still think you probably want more flexibility if you're the Titans. You may have more moves ahead. I still think you very likely are looking at the tight end market, which of course is about to get going here too. So I don't know if it's as simple as that, and then you're done. But there you go. You can do it. You just have to think down the road, what's that going to do to you? Because something's not going to add up later. And it may be as simple as, well, you cut Julio Jones after 22, right? You do feel good, I think, at this point about Ryan Tannehill playing out his contract with you right now. So
I'd feel pretty good.
From his perspective, that's fine. But again, you are going to be tighter because you are kicking the can down the road if you do this. So we know the cap's going up. We don't know exactly how much, but we know it's going up. You also know that you have Jeffrey Simmons coming. You have A.J. Brown coming. You have some of these guys that I think are very likely. I think with A.J. Brown, it's almost a given. Now, of course, A.J. Brown's second-round pick, you don't have the option year, but you're going to give him a second deal.
Yeah.
Simmons right now, I would guess he's a guy who's on the path to having his option picked up and having a second deal too. I mean, you've got things to consider down the road, so it's not just simple as, hey, the money goes away. But I mean, this seems like a pretty helpful tool here for you that you could use if you're John Robinson. He hasn't done much of this. He did something with Byard's contract to move it around a little bit, but it was pretty minor, and I think that's the only thing he's done of this nature, to create room. So some teams do it left and right, and then it's go for it, and then you're in some deep doo-doo at some point. But I think if it worked out and you liked the trade terms, then I think it's really worth looking at. And I know Jared.
I saw that.
Yeah, Jared got just ratioed on because he's like, "There's no way that's true," or whatever. I don't know what
quote,
he said.
"The Tannehill restructure being the only move required simply isn't true, and those who say that do not understand contracts in the NFL."
Should we have Jared on the show to explain contracts in the NFL to us today?
Maybe so. Give him a shot. Yeah.
I mean, he's a good dancer. I can tell you that after this
is.
weekend. I don't know about his NFL contract expertise. Actually, it is. What would be a good idea is to have Joel Corey on because, and he has written some. And actually, I think he referred to this as well. He wrote a piece about this last week. He wasn't really focused just on the Titans' perspective on it. He was more on the Falcons and some various teams that could be in it. But I think he referred to that as well. So, listen, it makes sense if you look at it and what you do with the numbers. But again, you are kicking the can. You will pay that money. You will be tighter later. I still think there's probably another move you have to make. John Robinson certainly goes into camp. He does not like to be right up against the cap like most GMs. who know how to do their jobs. Like you can't be at right up against the line. And again, I think they are going to make a tight end move here too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, especially now that it's June 1st, could be on the horizon pretty quickly for the Titans. But also, like, I wonder in this discussion when we're talking about restructuring money, kicking the can down the road, like how much of this is just trying to identify exactly what the window is if you're the Titans? Because you hear a lot of fans, they say, well, who cares if you kick the can down the road? Your window to win is now, where you have Derrick Henry playing at this level. You've got A.J. Brown on his rookie deal. You've got Ryan Tannehill coming in, still not costing you all that much. Do you really care if you kick the can down the road and maybe Derrick Henry's contract, he's done at that point? It's not the same. He's not the same player anymore. Does it really matter at that point? The window to win is now. Look, I certainly understand that line of thinking, and that just, to me, it doesn't jive with a lot of what we've seen from John Robinson from this standpoint. To, like you said, he's just not been a guy that likes to restructure some of these deals and likes to kick the can down the road. I do understand that thinking from Titans fans saying, look, this next year, this next 2 years, this is your opportunity to win if you're the Titans, and maybe Julio Jones is the difference to you competing for Super Bowl in the AFC and getting past Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I mean, even though he hasn't done this in terms of ways to find space, like Jadeveon Clowney that's a go for it move, right? So he went out and paid a lot of money for a gamble, a guy who was coming off a core there are a lot of varying opinions about Clowney, and it turned out to be not a good move. But to me, it was, if you're a Titans fan and you want your GM to go for it, I mean, I think he's already showed you that he will do it. So I don't think this is like a non-starter, but I do think that, and of course Vin Marino is, the Titans cap guru. I mean, he's the one who has to project this all down the road and figure out, okay, and then there's this and this and this, and what is this going to mean? But it is go for it time. And if you look at like the Chiefs, I mean, look, the Titans, we'll see if their defense is better. I'm sure it'll be somewhat better. In some ways it can't be worse. But I still think when you get into a game like that, and maybe even a game against the Bills, some of these other teams in the AFC, at some point, like, it's just like you're just going to have to score a ton of points.
Yeah.
And how much does Julio Jones help you? I also just reject the idea, and I've heard this, and frankly I've heard this on Jared's show quite a bit, like, this is a running team. They're built around that. And so why would you, like, mess with that? I mean, to me, it's like you should do things that are based around the talent you have. If you're ever in a situation, well, this is our system and we run the football, no. Be more balanced, be more explosive, be more dangerous. Spread the ball around to 3 great players. That's a no-brainer. It's on the coaches to figure that out. So the idea that, like, Julio Jones is going to, like, change the Titan system for the worse. I mean, haven't we been hearing for years how this is an archaic system and what are they doing? This is a passing league. Have a balanced offense.
Wouldn't that just make life for Derrick Henry a whole lot easier? Like, how many less stacked boxes is he going to see when you have Julio Jones and A.J. Brown on the field at the same time? You can't just stack the box on every play.
Or if you do, you're just going to get torched.
And he will get fewer carries, and that's good too. Yeah. I mean, you can't keep looking for 400 carries and 2,000 yards from this guy, And
there's an extra game this year too.
That's true.
Right.
We know.
Yeah.
I don't know if Joe heard.
Thank goodness. I mean, look, if he becomes a 300 carry back at 1,500, along with 2 receivers, and again, I'm sure the numbers won't all be there for everybody like they would be, if you were the solo star. Like Julio Jones has been, at least at some points in his career in Atlanta. But if he wants to win, then here you go. And the idea that this is like, I don't know, this is a power running offense. And okay, so now you have another great player in it. You do pass the ball still in this offense, last I saw.
Well, and also, I mean, it's interesting, too, to think about the price. So Florio's talking about the belief is a second-round pick that the Titans will give up to land Julio Jones from the Falcons. What are your thoughts on that? Because we've seen it. John Robinson, he's really good at second-round picks. He's had a lot of second-round picks that have hit pretty well. Honestly, if that's the price, I have no hesitation giving up a second-round pick for Julio Jones. With this team and this offense and what I think he could bring to the table, I have no problem giving up a second-round pick if I'm the Titans. I know some people disagree with that. I would not hesitate to give up a second-round pick.
Well, I mean, my hesitation would be just the whole question here again of what is he? Do you believe that he can be healthy? Do you believe he can still get through full seasons in this league? What percentage of peak Julio Jones is he if he is healthy? But if you feel good about those things, I think it's a fair price. I mean, it's a big thing. It's a lot to give up because those second-round picks are crucial. And in a lot of drafts, that's really where people make hay. But I agree. I mean, if you feel good about this and you can make the money work, I think it's absolutely what you should do. I mean, it's a go for it move, and that's where they are.
Now, if you're giving up a second-round pick, are you also taking on the entire salary from Atlanta, or are you hoping why don't you guys pay a little bit of that portion as well? I mean, I'm sure you're hoping that, but is that realistic at that point?
I don't know. I mean, my guess is if it's a second-round pick, that's probably comes with you take it all on.
Yeah.
Again, you've got the whole idea of send back a veteran, and we talked to Jeff Schultz, and it sounds like Atlanta is open to getting a quality football player back to take some of the salary back. So there would still be they don't have to get rid of the whole 15 this year. The team they're trading with maybe then gets a little bit of relief. Who that would be, we've thrown out some different names for that. But if it's straight up second round pick, my guess is it's just you're taking on the whole salary.
So we're off and running here today on the Julio Jones discussion. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. When we come back, today is June 1st in the NFL. What does that mean for the Titans in the immediate future? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. And Joe, as we said earlier in the show, it is June 1st, and that signals a pretty big day in the NFL. And as you said, it's amazing how much they can dominate the news cycle at this point, but I would expect to see some movement in the NFL starting today with some trades, maybe a second wave of free agency as well, with some contracts becoming a little bit more tolerable for teams to take on, given this salary cap year that was not as high as we expected as you kind of forecasted what 2021 free agency could look like. My question for you, Joe Rexrode, what does this mean in the immediate future for the Titans? Because we've spent a lot of time talking about Julio Jones and whether or not the Titans are going to have interest and availability to make that move. They're also still a tight end position that's out there as well that the Titans are going to need to address at some point. What do you think we're going to see out of the Titans in the immediate future, and how quickly do you think we could see the Titans address the tight end position now that June 1st has arrived?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously it could happen now. I mean, it becomes competitive, I suppose. So I would think that we might see something pretty quickly. And obviously, Zach Ertz is, to me, the top person of interest here. I still think he's a really good player. I've had some arguments with other Nashville media people about Ertz in the last few days, like he's done, he's 30 and he had a high ankle sprain last year. I mean, it's, I think he's got a lot left, or at least he's got quite a bit of pretty good play left. I don't know now how much do you have to pay Zach Ertz. I don't know. Can you get him for $3-4 million, something like that? Because that's the thing. You talk about Julio Jones. Let me clear my throat here. You talk about Julio Jones. Tannehill, $15 million, create that room and everything. Again, I still think that you really, if you're the Titans, have to address this position. I mean, who else is out there? There's obviously also trade possibilities. We've talked before about O.J. Howard from the Bucs, who's kind of underutilized. Yep. There. You got, Kyle Rudolph is a cut of the Vikings. Now, there's a guy who I think is a lot more on the other side of things, but maybe the price would be better for him, and maybe he's still got some decent football in him left. But I would probably expect something to happen right away, but maybe they're occupied with these Julio Jones conversations at this point. But
how surprised are you that Michael Pruitt is still out there and that the Titans have not brought him back? And do you think at this point, if they've not brought him back, that maybe he's not coming back to this offense? Because it's kind of starting to feel that way to me. I would think, obviously there's not a ton of demand for Michael Pruitt out there. My guess would be, if he was coming back to the Titans, I wouldn't think it would have been this difficult to work out at this point in terms of coming to the financial part of this deal. It's not like Michael Pruitt's going to be demanding a high dollar out there.
Yeah. He there were some reports last week of him visiting a couple different places, trying to find it now. But there are a couple teams that he has visited recently. So it seems like things have moved on. We'll see if someone signs him. I think it's always, if not, it's always there as a possibility.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be a bad idea to me to have a guy who knows the system, who has been a very good run blocker for you, has actually, I think, demonstrated some efficiency in the pass game too. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Sorry, is my Zoom blowing up right now? I think it is. I think my Wi-Fi is failing, Elijah. So I just want to apologize.
There's a nice frozen Joe Rexrode face.
A killer frozen
right
Joe Rexrode face.
I bet
beautiful.
I bet you that's real nice.
So many screenshots
Elijah,
are being
we
taken
might have
right
to
now.
screenshot that and take it out. It'd be good.
Oh, it's too late.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Ron texting in says, go ahead and trade Ben Jones. He's getting old, and at the end of his contract, save some money and use Aaron Brewer. What do you think about that? Going ahead and trading Ben Jones if you're the Titans, maybe freeing up some money that way, according to Ron.
How about draft Trey Smith, and then you've got another interior guy? No, I've heard this thrown out there, and man, I will say a couple years ago, I wasn't sure about Ben Jones. I was like, man, he just looks like he's struggling. I think Ben Jones has played through a lot of nagging and maybe even a little bit more than nagging injuries over the years. I don't think you can overstate the importance of having an experienced center up there, calling protections out, being, obviously the nucleus of that offensive line. I don't know how many years Ben Jones has left, but I would say this year they have a chance at a pretty special offensive line, and I just don't know if you want to just hand things over to Aaron Brewer at this point. I don't. I mean, I get it. You certainly you're saving cap hit there if you make this move, but I think that's a pretty dramatic gamble to go there, and then also, what's your interior depth at that point? I don't think that's the move.
Well, there's a move that I keep waiting for them to make that I guess I'm just interested at this point to see if we're just waiting on Stephen Gostkowski to make a decision or what's going on here. But we all know, like watching this team over the past couple of years, kicking field goals at times has been an adventure for this group out there. And it started to be an adventure in the first half of last year as well. And then Gostkowski figured it out, and then our man Sam Sloman came in at the end of the year and made a gigantic kick in Houston. Who could forget the legend Sam Sloman? But here we are, and we're, it's June 1st. Training camp's not that far away. I have no clue who's going to be kicking field goals for the Titans at this point. The longer this goes on, the more I guess it's just going to be Stephen Gostkowski, I guess. Like, just waiting for him to make a decision on whether or not he's coming back. I have no clue. Like, at what point are we going to figure out who's kicking field goals for this team, Joe Rexrode?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he kind of – it's kind of like very different, way more urgent, but it's like Michael Pruitt, like, well, he'll be there if you need him, But maybe they really like the Ohio State kicker. If I'm the Titans going into camp with the rookie from Ohio State and Tucker McCann in a competition, I just don't know if I feel great about that. So, yeah, that'd still be my guess that whenever they're going to end up going back to Gostkowski and he'll sign and they'll do another year. But, man, they really need to find the next kicker, for the next long-term kicker. Obviously, Gostkowski is not that guy. But without, drafting someone or going out to make a move, I mean, it's to me it just reads like this competition with Gostkowski maybe is Gostkowski like after they see if these guys are competing and they don't like what they see?
Maybe.
Then they sign him? Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Titans start camp in, what'll it be, 7 weeks, and it's the two young guys competing, and that's it.
Does it feel like they've undervalued this position a little bit? Because, I mean, you would think this team, given what's happened in the last couple of years here, would have all the reason in the world to not undervalue the kicking position. But to me, the more and more this continues to happen, the more I feel like they just say, it's a kicker, whatever. We'll figure that out at some point along the line. And I think if they're not careful, that could really come back to bite you one of these days.
Right. I mean, I'm sure it'll never be worse than it was in 2019, which is just amazing to think that team gets to the AFC Championship game with one of the all-time worst place-kicking performances, or in recent history at least. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. Do they not value it enough? Obviously, if they could turn back the clock, they'd do different things with Ryan Suckup, and he'd still be their really, really good, Pro Bowl caliber kicker right now. But that's not how it worked out. So they made some mistakes along the way, which didn't necessarily mean undervaluing the position. But since then, I mean, look, signing Gostkowski was a big move at the time,
sure,
right? You're talking about an all-time great kicker, had kind of wobbled the year before, had been injured, and it worked out okay in the end. But yeah, I agree. Like you've got to figure out who your next long-term kicker is. Maybe the kid from Ohio State is that good. There, I mean, he was hurt last year too. Some people think that he's really good, but man, it's just hard. It's hard to know until people get on this stage and then have to do it as consistently as you have to do it to even stick in this league.
Well, and it's funny, we were talking about Michael Pruitt earlier in this segment, and 5 minutes ago, Josina Anderson coming out with a tweet that says, free agent tight end Michael Pruitt is currently scheduled to travel today for his visit with the 49ers and work out on Wednesday, per source. So, visit to the 49ers for Michael Pruitt.
Okay.
So, there you go.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like he's going to be coming back here.
Maybe.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see. We'll see if they sign him or not. But the Titans, I mean, I think the Titans have to, and this is also what complicates everything, including the Julio talks, is I think they really should be looking to invest a little bit more than you would in Michael Pruitt into someone else.
Agreed. But you can't. There's not enough money to go around.
Can't have it all.
When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the Titans and look at things offensively. How fearful are we of significant regression for the Titans heading into this next season? We'll talk about that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. Tonight, the Sounds are on the road to face the Charlotte Knights, the AAA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. The pregame show with Jeff Hemp starts at 5:50 and first pitch is at 6:04 p.m. Nashville Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and by 312 Pizza Company. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Talking Titans and taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. So, Joe, we've talked a lot about the Titans offense and what it could look like here in the next coming weeks leading up to training camp, whether that's Julio Jones joining the mix or a tight end of some kind joining the mix as well. But we'll see what happens on that front and react to that when it actually happens. Right now, what you see now, based on the team that they have and the offense that is here, this is an interesting spot to be in if you're the Titans, specifically on offense, because you're coming off a season where you're a top 3 offense in the entire NFL. Your offensive coordinator is now gone. He's the head coach of the Falcons. Corey Davis is gone. Jonnu Smith is gone as well. You're talking about 2 pretty big weapons there on offense for your team that are no longer here. You still have A.J. Brown, you still have Derrick Henry, and you still have Ryan Tannehill. So you feel good about the offense. The question is, how worried are you if you're a Titans fan about significant regression? And what I mean by that is I'm not talking about going from, the second best offense or the third best offense in the NFL to the 7th or 8th. I'm talking going from second or third best offense in the NFL right to middle of the pack. How much of a difference would that have made with this team last year, going from a top 3 offense to a top 12 or 13 offense? I mean, they may not have made the playoffs at that point. So how concerned would you be about that if you're a Titans fan based on the coaching changes, the personnel changes that we've seen thus far, and just, frankly, the law of averages in the NFL as well, and how difficult it is to do what the Titans offense pulled off a year ago?
Well, I think you expect some regression. I mean, to me, I would rank it this way. There's 3 people that this offense has lost that are significant in this discussion. Third on the list is Corey Davis. Corey Davis was really good. He's a good player. It would be great to see him, succeed with the Jets. I don't think that's some, devastating loss. Jonnu Smith, I'd rank him second. Look, I know the production wasn't there, but you watch this team play the last couple of years. He was a weapon, and he would have been a big part of keeping this offense up near the top this year. He's gone. But the number one question to me is you lose Arthur Smith. I don't think you should at all dismiss or overlook how good he was at game planning and play calling and sequencing and setting things up and finding little things. He was really good. It's why he's a head coach right now. It's part of why he's a head coach right now. And it's part of why he's a head coach is also because he's really good with his players, really good coach on the field with players, relationships, all those things play into this. And that's the big concern for me. And I'm certainly willing to give Todd Downing another. I mean, he deserves another chance, or it's not like some ridiculous idea that he'd get another chance as poorly as that 1 year in Oakland went. I mean, I think there are a lot of factors in that. We'll see. We're going to find out more about Todd Downing.
Yeah.
But it's hard to expect anyone to just come. Dill, A.J. Brown, Anthony Ferkser. I think Darrington Evans can be a part of a different dimension potentially for this offense. And I think the offensive line could be special. Now, some of that depends on the rookie. Dylan Radun's coming in and being ready to play. But, I mean, again, let's not forget that Taylor Lewan missed most of last year and that the offense changed without him and still was really good. But getting him back, that's adding a great player. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
It is. I always, when I look at what's happened with this group the last couple of years, you feel great if the top 3 are healthy. Like if A.J. Brown, Tannehill, and Henry are all on the field, I think you feel pretty good about this offense regardless of who's calling the plays and regardless of really what the entire other picture looks like, because those 3, I mean, those are just 3 foundational pieces to an offense. It does kind of make me nervous, though, that, outside of A.J. Brown being banged up a little bit last year, he still played in 14 games, obviously still very productive. I mean, Tannehill has been completely healthy since he got here. Derrick Henry, for as many carries as he has and the beating that he takes people, he's been pretty healthy the last couple of years. Like, that just doesn't really happen in the NFL, where your most important players on offense just remain healthy for the most part. Now, to your point, you did talk about Taylor Lewan, and that was a gigantic loss for this Titans offense last year. I don't think there's any way around that. And having him come back in, if he is the Taylor Lewan that we've gotten used to seeing and he can stay healthy, I mean, it is. It's going to make a massive difference for this offense. But I do wonder, and we talked about this a little bit with the backup quarterback discussion too, like how much can you really bank on, Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry remaining completely healthy for a third season in a row? I mean, it's not something that you can really worry about right now if you're John Robinson, and I get that. Like, if they get hurt, the offense is going to struggle. That's just the way it is. But I do, when I take a look at Tannehill, and he had some injury history before he got here, and Derrick Henry, just the amount of hits that he delivers and the amount of hits that he takes, I know that he just kind of feels like he's built differently. But at some point, it's got to catch up eventually, right? You would think.
Well, I don't know with Henry. I mean, at some point, but I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Catching up right now.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, obviously, there's always the freak injury where the helmet hits the knee the wrong way. I mean, no one is immune to that. But as far as wear and tear stuff, yeah, he looks to be in pretty good shape at this point. Tannehill has that. That's the thing you kind of forget is how many injuries he had previously.
Right.
I mean, he's had serious knee and shoulder stuff in Miami. So, and also there are times when the way he plays lends itself to him getting hurt again. But that's been fine. But I mean, look, if you go around the league, Patrick Mahomes, what, you good now? No, you're holding on for dear life against the Browns. Baker Mayfield. I mean, every year there's some teams in the NFL who have these key injuries, and they're basically screwed, and the Titans will be too. But it's I mean, this league, the salary cap dictates that you're just not going to be prepared for that. Now, I will say that if there's one place where you can probably help yourself, let's say you do miss A.J. Brown for 2-3 games, so who are you rolling out there as your 1 and your 2? I mean, that's – so, like, your receiver depth is some teams are a lot better than others. And, look, if, let's say, Derrick Henry does have, he's had like a hammy here and there or whatever, is Darrington Evans ready to come in this year and give you a 25-carry game if need be? I don't know. But that's why you drafted him. You drafted him to be a pass-catching presence, but also to be your number 2 and to give you good backup. So maybe you're okay there. At receiver, I think you can look at it and say, you can use another guy for sure.
What are they going to do right now if Anthony Ferguson gets hurt?
Yeah, well, and there's that too, right? I mean, Jared Pinkney didn't show up for OTAs last week, which to me was a kind of a curious decision for a guy who is trying to stick in this league.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand this is voluntary, and there's a lot of veterans who, the union said what it said, but man, if I was Pinkney, I think I would have been out on that field. The other guys, the undrafted free agents they signed were out there. But, yeah, I mean, it's not. But if they lose Tannehill, like, when you go to the quarterback, count up the teams for me in this league who have good starters who are, we're feeling fine when they lose the starter. They're probably screwed. Like, the Saints can survive with Bridgewater because they have a really good team all around, Bridgewater when Breeze goes down, and they hang in there and they're fine.
Well, you have Taysom Hill, too. But, yeah.
What's that?
Well, you have Taysom Hill running around, too.
Well, of course. I mean,
Taysom Hill never lost to the Atlanta Falcons. He's 2 for 2.
I mean, just his presence alone is, like, inspirational, really, for
really
everyone.
It's like Brady.
Yeah. What if Taysom Hill and Brady were on the same team? Like, their defensive players would never miss a tackle. They would be incredibly unstoppable. But, yeah, most teams are going to be hosed. So, I mean, the Tannehill thing to me is like, I mean, if Deshaun Kaiser, beats out Logan Woodside, okay, great. But
what's the difference?
I mean, maybe there's a difference, but you just need to keep your quarterback upright. You do. I think the depth can come into play at some of those other positions and doesn't look great at receiver. But if you bring in Julio Jones, well, there you go. You have another number 1 to step in when if your number 1 has to miss some time.
There you go. It's as simple as that.
It all comes back around. Just make the trade for Julio Jones.
To Julio Jones here at this point. Look, I think we're going to see some regression from this Titans offense to some degree. I don't think it's going to be a huge amount. Like, I still think this is a pretty good offense. Now, I am worried about tight end, obviously, and I think they'll address that coming up. I'm worried about the depth at receiver as well. Although, as you've said, like, if Josh Reynolds comes in is he really going to be that far off from what Corey Davis was? I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Corey Davis is really good, and I don't want to minimize what Corey Davis did here last year because it was very impressive to me. It was exactly what he needed to do heading into a contract year. So good on him for doing that. To your point, in this offense with this running back and A.J. Brown on the other side, how many other receivers in the league can take advantage of those matchups? I don't know. Maybe Josh Reynolds can't do that. I think right now, based on the way the offense looks today, that's what the Titans are banking on with Josh Reynolds coming in, being apparently they're number 2 at the moment.
Yeah, and I think Des Fitzpatrick, there's definitely a need for him to be ready. And I feel like all indications are he's going to do everything necessary to be ready. We'll see. It's not always that simple for a rookie receiver. I also still wonder just about the slot and the absence of a true slot guy. I still feel like that's a real useful thing to have. Obviously, the Titans have not valued that or have not thought along the same lines, like got to get a slot receiver as they did when they signed Humphreys. So we'll see how that goes. I think sometimes that's real important to move the chains.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ron texting in says, I'm not a money cruncher, but this team needs to do whatever it takes to get to the Super Bowl in the next 2 years. Players are getting older, and we're around the corner from a rebuild, so the decision for me is to act now and pay later for it. The window is closing fast. John needs to take advantage of the players we have now and know that we're not going to have them for that long. Make a run, with about 17 exclamation points after that.
Wow. I don't disagree. I mean, look, at some point here in the next few years, you're going to be in a position, if you're the Titans, probably. I mean, maybe Tannehill is going to go into his 40s too and play at a high level. But probably once his deal is up, you're going to be in quarterback search mode. And it's hard to get a great quarterback. I mean, this one, they trade a 4th-round pick. It turns out to be really the best move that John Robinson has made.
Yep.
But it's hard to count on that, of course. And so at some point here in a few years, you're going to be back in that mode, and you may be, needing to be high in the draft to get the quarterback you need. I mean, it is coming around. So I don't disagree with the general idea. Like, if you can make it work and you can get a great player, I think it's worth doing.
When we come back, we will switch gears and get into the Nashville Predators. Some off-season questions coming up later this week. The Predators will be meeting with the media. What is the biggest question facing this Predators team this offseason as they try to find their way back into contention for the Stanley Cup? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Taking your thoughts all show long on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We've got a special Tuesday edition of the Rex Rant coming up later this hour at 7:45 as well. So looking forward to that coming up later this hour. Joe Rexrode's weekly rant. You thought we might miss it because we weren't here on Monday, but we're not going to miss it, Joe. I'm looking forward to it. No pressure.
It's just trying to inspire conversation.
That's right.
I welcome your participation, Elijah, and anyone else out there.
That's what we do here on the program. Going to have Gentry Estes from the Tennessean join us to begin the 8 o'clock hour as well. Joe, I can't believe I've gone this far into the show, and we're going to get to the Predators here in just a few seconds. How about that Toronto Maple Leafs collapse we saw? Up 3-1 in the series, and Montreal, Shea Weber and company come back last night, and they close it out, come back from 3-1 down to win the series, going away, and Toronto out once again in the first round. They've not won a series since 2004, have gone 55 years without winning a Stanley Cup. It's going over well in Toronto today.
I mean, I'm trying to tell me the franchises in sports that can compare to what they do to their fans.
I don't know, man.
Because, some are crap, okay?
Sure.
I make fun of the team that will not yield. Well, that's great, and they're crap, okay? But no one expects them to be anything but crap, right? This is, the Leafs, and they're loaded, and
Well, everybody thinks they're like God's gift to hockey up there.
Exactly. Give me any, this would be like, well, maybe we're seeing the early. This would be like the Cowboys, just constantly flubbing these great opportunities.
So maybe we have seen this.
Yeah, but
this is to a pretty. It's a different level.
But at least the Cowboys, like Jerry Jones, they've got rings. You know, they've had. You're talking 1967, man. 1967.
It's not even the same league.
The crazy thing about the Leafs and in their fans too, Richard Deitch came on, Darren Donick and Chase. This was at the beginning of the season when the Leafs were just on fire. This might have been, I guess, late February or early March. And he, I think it was Darren that asked him what people think of the Leafs over there, and he's like, they're still pessimistic. They just know something bad's really going to happen come playoff time. And sure enough, that I guess that section of Leafs fans did kind of foresee this, which this is kind of what they do. The Leafs just leafed really hard last night.
And between them and Edmonton, the fact that we have Winnipeg, Montreal playing something else.
I just want you to think about what you just said for a second. And look, you'll take these players any day of the week. I'm not saying that you won't. But Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, 4 guys that we get Predators fans all the time talking about, why can't you find one of these young players like a Matthews or a Marner or anybody like this? And I get it. Again, I'm not saying you don't want them because they're great and they're awesome. And I think all 4 of those guys I just talked about, eventually they're going to break through. They're going to find ways to win because talent at the end of the day, you'll win. But this is crazy. This just goes to show you what it's like in the Stanley Cup playoffs and how hard it is. Edmonton got swept, and you've got the best player in the world by a country mile, and got swept by Winnipeg. And now all of a sudden Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner combined for 1 goal in the playoffs, and they can't get out of the first round against a Montreal team that, quite frankly, they're not good. They're not a very good team. And you can't get out of the first round? That just kind of goes to show how difficult this can be in the playoffs.
So not a very good team, but it also shows you that stopping pucks matters.
Pretty important.
You want to talk about the quality of a team, right?
Yes.
And that's an issue in both Toronto and Edmonton.
Yeah.
So
yes, it is.
So if you want to take this to the Preds discussion, at least if you want to find reasons for optimism, there's one right now.
Sure. When you start talking about the biggest questions facing the Predators, goaltender at the moment, not one of them. Now, I guess one of the questions could be, how much is this goaltender about to cost you heading into free agency coming up? He is a restricted free agent, and UC Saros probably in for a nice raise coming up this summer. Was making $1.5 million per year Joe, I would say that's about to go up pretty significantly. So congratulations to UC Saros for that. But as you look at the offseason for the Predators, and they're going to be discussing things later this week with some players that will be made available, and I believe David Poile and John Hines as well coming up later this week. So we'll have a lot to get to with the Predators and some interesting conversations coming up later this week. But there's a lot going on this offseason. You've got the expansion draft. You've got potentially new contracts for not only UC Saros, but maybe Matthias Ekholm and Philip Forsberg as well. What does the future look like for Mikael Granlund? And also, and Adam Vingan kind of broke this down yesterday at The Athletic, looking at the forwards specifically right now, there's kind of a logjam right now in terms of you've got Haula, you've got Granlund. I would say it's almost next to impossible for both of those guys to be coming back next year. But you also have this parade of young guys like Olivier and Jeannot and Philip Tomasino, Rem Pitlick maybe in the fold next year as well. You can only play 12 forwards a night, and they've got more than 12 forwards right now vying for some of these spots. I'm interested to see what that looks like as well. So, Joe, as you look at this discussion, and I didn't even bring up Johansson and Duchesne throughout that entire thing, what is the biggest question, in your opinion, facing the Predators this offseason as we now dive into offseason Predators discussion as well?
Well, that's it. The thing you just mentioned at the end. I mean, it's do you believe both are part of your future? Do you believe one or the other is part of your future? If you believe you're not parting with both, right?
No.
I mean, there's just no way.
It's just a 0% chance.
Because you're not going to find a trade partner, I don't think, for either deal, especially Duchesne's. But the question to me is just, if you want to part with one of them, can you part with one of them?
Exactly.
I mean, that's it. That's the number one question to me. And if that is indeed what you want to do, if you're David Poile, then I think you're probably going to have to get into some real interesting discussions with Ron Francis about more compensation going that way. How much are you willing to give up to make that happen? And again, when you talk about Poile, if that is what you choose to do, maybe it isn't. Maybe we're totally off base, and he's not even thinking about that. But if that is what you choose to do, and let's say Duchesne is the one, what does that say about what you did 2 years ago when you gave him so much money to come in and score 19 goals so far in 100 games?
Yeah, it does not speak well. That's for sure. And to your point, and Adam Vingan kind of brings this up as well in the article he put together yesterday on The Athletic. I've said this many times. I think there is this thought process out there that, well, this is just it, and one of those two are not going to be back next year, and that's going to be the way it is, and the Predators are going to get out from underneath one of those contracts, and then all of a sudden you've got some more money freed up and some freedom to kind of exercise, whether it's free agency or trades, whatever you want to do as you move forward if you're David Poile. And the more I think about it, the more I see the numbers, and the more I think about the flat cap around the league, I just don't really see it happening. If I'm Seattle, is there a temptation there to take either a Ryan Johansson or a Matt Duchesne? I mean, maybe. If you're Ron Francis and you think that you can get the best out of those guys and it's just a bad fit here in Nashville and they can come in and maybe bring some life to an expansion franchise, maybe. But I'm not doing that unless the Predators are giving up a lot of stuff back. And I'm talking maybe either a first-round pick or maybe a high-level prospect. And I just don't see the Predators wanting to do that at this point, especially given what their pipeline looks like. Now, maybe you just get your hand forced and you say, all right, it's worth giving up a prospect we don't want to part ways with if it means getting one of these contracts off the books. Maybe that's what you have to do if you're David Poile. But I say all that to say, if I had to put a percentage on it right now of one of Johansson and Duchesne not being here next year, and I'm talking just one of them, I'd put it at less than 10%. I really would. And I think that would be, if you took a poll among Predators fans, I do not think that would be norm. I think there's this thought process out there that one of those two is just not going to be here next year. And I don't think it's going to be that easy.
No. And look, someone, I would just see if to find this text, but someone sent me a text about this last week. Gosh, it's just imagine what like Seattle will have. They're going to take on all these terrible contracts for various teams around the league. They're just going to have a great team, you know?
Yeah.
It's just not that simple. Now, listen, I do think that there could be interest on their part in Johansson. I think it's a little bit – I think there's a higher chance that Ron Francis could be like, you know what? I think there's still a lot there. And he could be a number one center for us. And, yeah, it's a big cost, but – yeah, I think he could be someone of value. I also think on the other side, if you're the Preds, I would not be all in on moving on from Ryan Johansson. That's me. But I would not be all in on that. I would be more motivated to move on from Duchesne just because it's just, in 2 years, I just don't think we've seen indications that he's going to get back to being a 60-point guy. I could be wrong on that too, but I don't see it. I don't see it in what we're seeing from him.
Well, and
you see these bursts of skill and speed,
and neither one of them have said this, so maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. Doesn't it feel like there's a little bit of a maybe disconnect is the right word between him and John Hines? Like,
yes.
Doesn't it feel like they're not on the same page when it comes to what their expectations are from each other?
I think if John Hines were making the decision on personnel here, I think John Hines would much more quickly move on from Duchesne than Johansson. Again, like you said, I don't know if it's less than 10%, but I think it's way less than 50%. And maybe I'd put it around 20 or something that they could get that they could move on from one of them. But it's not high. It's going to be very difficult. And yes, I think that now John Hines has sat both of those guys. He took them both off the power play. We think about them in a tandem.
Yeah.
But I would separate them in that way. I think John Hines and Matt Duchesne are not on the same page from everything we've seen and heard. And I'm not sitting here reporting that I've heard anything beyond what is the information that we all have access to, but I think it's kind of obvious. So that doesn't mean it's irreconcilable or anything like that, but I think certainly there have been some misunderstandings, and I think some frustration on Hines' part, and maybe some frustration on Duchesne's part too. I mean, even his comments after he was pulled off the power play that night when he had the game-winning goal was kind of like, it was tough. Like, he wasn't happy about it. Hey, do you expect a player to be happy who's been on a power play his whole career? No, but I think you're right. I think you're onto something there. Look, imagine they can't re-sign Granlund. They do move on from Johansson. So it's down the middle. It's Matt Duchesne and friends.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to be in that spot.
I don't know if you want to be in that spot either. We'll continue this discussion when we come back. Got a lot of your thoughts to get to as well on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. 1025 The Game and T-Mobile have partnered up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season. Tune in every Monday to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword to text in to win. Good luck from 1025 The Game, T-Mobile, and Nashville SC. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Talking all things Nashville Predators, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. What is the biggest question facing the Predators heading into this offseason? Ryan in Nashville texting in saying 2 players that will be gone this offseason will be Ryan Ellis and Victor Arvidsson. We talked about this last Friday, Joe, and I think you and I both called the shot. Arvidsson will not be here next year. Now, we're not reporting anything. That was just to call your shot Friday, and I still believe to some degree you've got to shake up this core a little bit because that's really the one thing they've not done to this point, and I expect that to happen in some form this offseason with David Poile and the Predators. What do you think of what Ryan threw out there that not only will Victor Arvidsson not be here next year, but maybe Ryan Ellis not here next year as well?
Well, look. If you look at this D-core, one of the big questions that I then would throw out at that is, what do you actually think about Dante Fabro's future?
Yeah.
Because I'm a big Alex Carrier believer after this season. I mean, I think he showed it enough for long enough to think that, he can be an important part of this D-core. Yossi and I think Ekholm has got to be a priority. They didn't move him. They could have gotten a lot for him with his quality as a player and with his contract.
Yep.
They could have gotten a lot back. They didn't. So, like you said, he's going into the last year of his deal making $375. I think Vingan wrote at The Athletic, you probably double that, something like that. Maybe in the 6, I don't know. Does he make more than like Ellis? He's probably about $6 million.
Probably about right there.
Right?
Yeah.
But the thing about, and this is kind of goes along with what you've been talking about with Duchesne and Johansson, this idea of, just trade Ellis. Okay. Well, you got to find a team willing to take on a guy whose contract at $6.25 million a year goes through 2027.
I don't think you'll have too difficult of a time with that with Ellis.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
What's the return?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've got a theory to float out there in the next segment that we'll get to that
We have to wait till then?
that could be very interesting.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
with that particular part of it, it's a little bit of a different situation
Okay.
in the next segment.
All
that we'll
right,
get
but
to.
you think that's not a – so it's more than if they don't trade him, their reluctance. He's a good player. I think after a few postseasons in recent years, you see some moments where the better has gotten of him.
I would agree. Now, I'll also say this. I think you watch some of those moments, and then there is a faction of the Predators fan base that just thinks, well, Ryan Ellis he's trash. He's not any good. Trade him right now. I saw some people at the end of the series saying he should be a healthy scratch. I'm just like, all right, come on. Like, what sort of conversation are we having here?
Well, that's like people like blaming Saros.
I know.
Like, okay, that's true. The puck did go in the net, so I guess you could blame the goalie if you don't ever watch hockey.
Yes.
That's fine.
But I say that to say 90%, probably around 90% of what you see from Ryan Ellis is pretty good. If you want to talk about the series he had in 2019, that's fine. It was not good. Moments of this past series against Carolina were not good for Ryan Ellis. You also have to talk about 2020, where I thought he's pretty darn good. And he's pretty good for the most part.
Well, moments of this series were huge.
Yeah.
He came up with some massive defensive and offensive zone plays. No, look, I think Ryan Ellis is a good player. I do think that when you look at who in the core, if you want to shake up the core, is possible. I think he's on the list of possibilities. Do you feel good that in the next few years Dante Fabro is going to get it figured out? Because if not, all of a sudden you're looking a light there. Well, if you were to move on from an Ellis.
Look, like I assume Matthias Ekholm is interested in signing an extension here. I've got no reason to think that he wouldn't be. By all accounts, talking to him, he seems to like it here. And You know, I remember Adam Vingan talking to him about the trade rumors. He doesn't want to be traded. It's not like he was going, requesting a trade to get out of Nashville. So I don't think they're going to have much difficulty signing him to an extension here in terms of, trying to get him back into the fold. But maybe we're wrong. Like, maybe he doesn't. And if he doesn't want to sign an extension, or if he doesn't want to sign one this summer and he wants to wait and see what it looks like as they move forward here, well, then that starts to get into interesting territory if you're David Poile. Because what you can't have happen is to just lose Matthias Ekholm for nothing next year. As the Columbus Blue Jackets are about to find out. Good defenseman, big, lanky, mobile defenseman like that don't grow on trees, and you can't afford to hang around and just let them walk for nothing. So I don't anticipate that there's going to be any problems getting Ekholm to sign an extension this summer. But if he wants to wait and see what the trajectory of this team looks like as they head into next year, that's when the conversation could get a little interesting between David Poile and the Ekholm camp.
Well, right, and that's where you talk about the next trading deadline as a possibility.
Yep.
Where, now he's straight up rental, whereas this year you had that extra year, which is very attractive for teams, who covet a player like that. So that's a good point. I would suspect also that that it wouldn't be a problem. I mean, there's also other guys who need to get paid more. Jeannot and Olivier. I mean, They're not paying much, but they are restricted free agents. Tolvanen is a restricted free agent. Investment across the board there that you have to factor into the whole picture. I think, like Vingan said, it's like $17 million right now in cap space, but it can get gobbled up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it can. And, it's interesting to think about, too, because also Philip Forsberg is on the table this summer for the Predators as well. And look, I feel like, and we talked about this a little bit last week heading into Game 6, I feel like there's a little bit of you're always kind of left wanting more with Philip Forsberg. And don't get me wrong, he has been very good for the Predators. I think he absolutely should be a part of the future and what they're trying to do here. I think he's still got a lot of good hockey left in him. I'm interested to see what his deal looks like, because I think it's going to end up somewhere around $8 million. If it starts to get much higher than that, I might be a little hesitant on that if I'm David Poile. Like, if you're paying Forsberg $9 million a year and you're getting 55, 60 points out of him, although he's a really good player, like, that's not worth $9 million a year.
I think he's making exactly what he should make right now. He's making $6 million. I think that's exactly what he is. Doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be. But as they try to get an extension done this summer, I know if I were on the other side of the table, I'd be like, why are you worth more than this? When they paid him the last contract, he was just younger version of what he is now.
Yeah.
Now you get to free agency, you will get more money. Someone will pay you, just as David Poile paid Matt Duchene. But I think that he's making exactly what he should make.
I'm interested to see what that looks like, because look, he's really important to what they do here, but I still feel like, the conversation that we seem to have on an annual basis, and we talked to him about it before the year even started this year, about being a 40-goal guy in an 82-game regular season. Like, I still believe that he's got the ability to do that. I look at the track record now at this point, and then you factor in the injuries that have started to become a problem with him as well. It's just difficult for me to believe that at 27 years old, he's just all of a sudden going to be, all right, here I am, 40 goals, 75-point guy every year. I don't think that's going to happen at this point.
No, you almost expect at this point there's going to be 15 to 20 games he doesn't play. I mean, that's I don't have it in front of, what, 3 straight years?
That's basically what it's
years?
been, the last 3 years.
So there's a lot. There's a lot to consider here with a lot of these players. And then again, what can you do to make it this a short-term fix, or does that just have to be wiped away? I understand the move that they made this year, that the way they played, it was great, but do you feel like you can basically keep this crew together and actually be a contender next year?
So there's a name out there in the NHL that Predators fans are very familiar with that has now become available. Could that be an option for the Predators to pursue? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Listen to the game every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday presented by Kentucky Kingdom and Hurricane Bay. Listen for keywords at 9, at noon, and at 3 o'clock. And when you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com and enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. We'll have the Rex Rant coming up next segment at 7:45, so make sure you're tuned in for that. Also, Gentry Estes from the Tennessean coming your way at 8 o'clock. Joe, an interesting development over the weekend in the NHL as well, outside of the playoffs, and that is former Nashville Predator, current Columbus Blue Jacket, Seth Jones, announcing to the Blue Jackets that he wants to test free agency, does not intend to sign a long-term contract with Columbus, and Seth Jones has 1 year remaining on his deal, and that puts Columbus in an interesting situation because they are going basically into full rebuild mode at this point. Tortorella is out. They've lost Foligno. They just don't have a whole lot going for them right now, and it's gotten to the point with Columbus where you're going to have to tear things down and start to build things anew. So I would expect at some point this summer for Seth Jones to be traded from Columbus. I don't think there's much To me, there's not much of a an upside to holding on to him and waiting to the deadline. Just maximize your value right now and go ahead and trade it. Now, and somebody brought this up on Twitter yesterday too, I would expect that probably also comes after the expansion draft, so the trading team does not have to worry about protecting him at that point. And also, Columbus, whatever assets they get back, you don't have to worry about adding them to the protection list at that point either. So I don't expect it to happen right this second, but at some point this summer, I think Seth Jones is going to be on the move. He's 26 years old. Right now, he's making $5.4 million per season. That is going to go up when he hits free agency and he signs his next deal. I don't know if he's going to get to like Roman Josi $9 million territory, but he's probably going to be somewhere around 8 per year when it comes to Seth Jones. He did not have a great year this past year. Nobody on Columbus really had all that great of a year this past year. But it is interesting to think about what could his future look like, and is there any way that the Predators could be a part of his future once again? As we know, Seth Jones was traded for Ryan Johansson. A lot of people said, Preds won that trade early. They get to the Cup final. And then the last couple of years, a lot of people talking about how, yes, the Columbus, they won this trade, Seth Jones. My question to you, number one, who won the trade between Johansson and Jones now, as this thing appears to be coming to a halt for Columbus with Seth Jones? And number two, is there any way that you consider trading for Seth Jones if you're the Predators this offseason based on the player that he is and the player that you know he can be with your group? There's some familiarity there as well.
Okay, first of all, on the who won the trade, I've always thought they both did well. I mean,
I did too.
I'd call them both winners of the trade as far as, like, you got what you anticipated getting, you got. Now, granted, Johansson's play the last 2 years has opened up the whole discussion. No one was even talking about it before that, right?
No.
But again, you're still talking about a Stanley Cup final that he had a lot to do with, President's Trophy team that he was great on, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, he was exactly what the Preds wanted. It's what they needed. They needed a real number one center, okay? And Columbus got a great player. And they also didn't really get any significant – I mean, they've had some pretty good rosters here.
They have.
And they haven't been able to really make it work. So you could look at that and say, well, what's the whole point then? Great. You had a great player. What did it do for your team? I mean, I think they both did fine with the trade. As far as the Preds trading for Seth Jones, I don't know, man. What are you trading for him?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up.
All right, here we go.
I was thinking about this last night. Let me start by saying I think the likelihood of something like this happening is about as likely as me winning the lottery. So let's just go ahead and throw that out there. But if you're talking about kind of revamping this defense, I think they're going to sign Matthias Ekholm. I think he's going to be a part of things moving forward here. You could trade Ryan Ellis, and you could trade him to Columbus, and they know that they've got him for the next 5 years at that point. Now, is that a heavy price to pay for a guy that has a year left on his deal? Yes. Would you want to have a contract probably negotiated with Seth Jones at that point before you pull a trigger on a trade like that? Yeah, probably. And you probably would have to give up something else in addition to Ryan Ellis if that was going to be the case. But I did have that thought of, if you want to get younger, you want to get, in my opinion, better on defense, that's an option for you. You can trade Ryan Ellis.
It's interesting. I think a lot of Preds fans will be like, yes, sign me up. Because like you said, I think Ryan Ellis gets a little bit of a raw deal.
I do.
Relative to what he does shift after shift after shift. He makes some mistakes that are glaring, but I think a lot of Preds fans would be all in on that.
I do too. Like I think, number one, this comes back to the Duchesne Johansson discussion becomes pretty important if you're also going to start paying Seth Jones and Matthias Ekholm as well, in addition to Roman Josi. I mean, that's a lot of money.
And Forsberg.
That's a lot of money at that point. So something would have to give at that point, and I fully recognize that. That's why I think this is very unlikely to happen. But you're talking about, like, if you could get Seth Jones in here, even if you're trading Ryan Ellis, I feel pretty good about that core. They can move. They're big. Now, I think people would also go the other way of, all right, why do you keep investing on the blue line? Get some people in here that could score. And I totally understand that. Like, that to me is a big question for the Predators moving forward. How are you going to find enough offense? And I don't know. I mean, Seth Jones is a really good player. He can do things offensively on the blue line. I don't know at the end of the day how much Seth Jones improves your team offensively. Like, it kind of feels like more of the same of having your offense come largely from the back end. That's how the Predators have done things. They've had some success doing that. I don't know that that's a way to win the Stanley Cup in today's NHL.
No, but you still need to be good there.
Sure.
Right? And like you said, you'd get younger. What was Seth Jones, what was his reaction when the Johansson trade happened?
As far as I can remember, I think he handled it pretty well.
Yeah.
I think you could kind of read the writing on the wall if you're Seth Jones. Like, even when he was drafted here, okay, they have Shea Weber, Roman Josi, Ryan Ellis, and Matthias Ekholm. At what point am I going to be playing top 4 minutes? So I think the reaction was generally positive for Seth Jones when he left.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, hey, I don't think that there's. I mean, I'm sure it's not going to happen, but I think it's a better chance than you winning the lottery, unless you're really going to go out and buy a whole bunch of tickets, man. You know, so it's an interesting thought. Just trading Ellis in general is, I think it's got to be up there in terms of just things that you could pull off, because there aren't a ton of them. You know, I mean, basically to me, it's like Arvidsson and Ellis are the two guys I look at where you'd have a chance to get a return that you like. I still think, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think teams would be interested in Ryan Ellis, and for Columbus in this situation, okay, they've got him locked up. But, man, it goes for a while, too. That deal goes for a while, and he's had his own injury stuff, too. But who else really on this roster has trade value?
There's not a ton.
I think it's those two guys, isn't it? It's Arvidsson and Ellis.
Yeah, I would say so. Our friend Gover on Twitter says, Poyle loves to bring guys back. I wrote about it a couple of years ago, talking about when they brought Hamuse back as well. David Poyle's certainly not afraid to go back down that path.
A little Scott Hartnell coming back in here.
Cody McLeod coming back twice.
Oh.
Yeah, buddy.
Vern Fiddler? He's a
absolutely
comeback guy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Andrew on Twitter says, is he going to play center? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not going to see Seth Jones down the middle.
Fair question.
I understand. That's going to be the thing moving forward is how can you find people who score? I saw Seth Jones, and I've seen some lists come out of the best fits for Seth Jones, and none of them have the Predators on it. I get that. I just wonder, is that something that, David Poyle's been known to think outside the box a little bit. I wonder if that's an option they could consider.
As we look at the whole thing, is it crazy to think that they could get Holla back here? I mean, I just feel like Hollaback guy. Is it crazy to think that they could get him back here? For like $2 million? Would it be a crazy idea as your third line center?
I don't think it's a crazy idea. When you factor in Ekholm, Forsberg, Saros, Granlund, it's difficult for me to imagine them making all that work.
Yeah, and then you're going to have more young guys. I mean, Tomasino,
he's going to be on
the trending toward him being part of the group, right?
Yes. I mean, at this point, if Tomasino does not make the team out of training camp next year, I will be surprised.
What's Ellie Tolvanen going to make?
That's a good question.
What are you paying Ellie Tolvanen?
It's a good question.
You're a healthy scratch, Ellie Tolvanen.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how at this point he could make all that much money. You're talking about basically a sample size this month of where he was really good for you of a month and a half. So
if I'm his agent, I'm like, it is.
I know.
Come on. That's what he's going to be for you guys in the future. You got to pay for this.
I would maybe you get a little bit more of a shorter term deal, kind of a bridge deal for Ellie Tolvanen. That'd be my guess as to what happens coming up this summer. Let's see though.
I'd say you're right. Bridge deal.
When we come back, it is time for the Rex Rant. Usually on Mondays, today on Tuesday for the holiday weekend. We'll do that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. I think so. Yeah, we do. I don't know where he's got it, though.
People got the wheels turning now. Well, my buddy just texted me, like, I didn't even think about Seth Jones and the Predators, and now you got me wanting. So.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Joe, I feel like that's kind of set the mood for you coming back in here. You ready now for the Rex rant?
Little master of puppets.
Man, buddy.
Man, good stuff.
See, usually Porth takes the opposite approach and just tries to make you mad, although I think the last couple of times he's kind of failed miserably in that. But this one I feel like is really going to put you in a good mood for the Rex rant, which I'm here for.
You think Porth has failed in making me mad with his musical selections?
A couple of times, yeah.
I mean, it's funny. What has he played recently? He did Kokomo.
Yeah, he did Kokomo. I don't think that made you mad though. I think you should
well, I mean, like if I can just hear Kokomo for a few seconds every decade, I can live with it and laugh.
Every decade.
Again, you go back to when you couldn't get away from that song.
Yes.
But as I start feeling about that, I feel that teenage rage again of Kokomo invading my brain. But yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to have Elijah playing a song I like.
There you go.
Either way, it's just a nice measured conversation I'd like to have right now.
Okay.
So it's about Naomi Osaka. First of all, for anybody who hasn't been following along, she, of course, fantastic young tennis player, Japanese tennis star, terrific future of the game type talent who decided she didn't want to do press conferences at the French Open. And then a lot of fallout from that.
Sure.
So, first of all, if you've been following along, I want to make sure you didn't miss one important moment. Now, anybody who's followed Osaka at all knows she is a painfully shy person. This has been very apparent over the years. And so when she's decided that she wasn't going to do media, my first reaction, first of all, was like, no, you can't do this, okay? Right. This connects you to fans. It's important for all these sports to have media. I think tennis right now needs as much visibility as possible from its young stars.
I would agree.
And when you're talking about someone who, she's made $20 million in prize money plus endorsements, media is a large role in that. It just is. It's an obligation. It's part of the deal. So I think you have to do it. But she also has talked about her own struggles with anxiety and depression, and the role some of these pressers have played in it. And I will say, if anybody's watched, especially like international tennis pressers,
they can be a little interesting.
Some of they can be a ruthless bunch, and you've seen this in particular with Serena Williams' interactions at times. So I'm sensitive to her personal situation. She elaborated on it more. When she decided to finally bail, she gets fined $15,000. She bails, and she talks a little bit more about what she went through after the U.S. Open. And then, of course, you got the Twitter trolls. Oh, it's not mental, blah blah blah. Like you have any clue? But it's bots galore out there on this stuff back and forth. And the fact that she has not been great on clay. So maybe she wouldn't do this, and maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe she doesn't do this at a tournament she has a better chance of winning. But the bottom line is, I think this is real, and anyone who's just dismissing it as real, I think is just being disingenuous at best. But here's what you shouldn't miss is that, and I may butcher the name here, but Gilles Moreton, okay, he's the president of the French Tennis Federation. Now I'm
going to say you're exactly right.
Yeah. Or Gilles Moreton, okay, president of the French Tennis Federation. So they fine her, and basically, there's some real strong language in the statement too about why she needs to do media. So then he comes out to the press conference, gives 4 sentences about it, and doesn't take questions.
Yeah. Jeez.
So the problem here to me,
Can't make this stuff up sometimes.
yeah, like. Thank you. It's so important that our tennis stars answer the questions of you. And no, I'm not taking questions. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yes. See
Good
ya.
night. So, like, there's a lot of angles of this story, but I think one of the big things to me is actual access versus fake access.
Right.
And we are seeing it more and more as an issue. So I think these pressers are largely worthless. I think these Zoom calls we do are largely worthless. And what you have seen with a lot of reaction to the Osaka thing is older tennis players talking about how it used to be back in the day that people were in the locker room and you would have conversations and one-on-ones and you would get to know people and you'd have relationships and there would be better stories out of it. People would get to know you better. You get to know them better. There'd be some level of trust and there would be like good results from that. And it has become now where the only access is these massive rooms, which, as we all know, not only, yes, you're trying to get information, have questions answered, but also in a lot of the cases with the media, it's a chance for them to grandstand and show how tough they are with their tough question. And it's largely pointless.
Turns into like a freaking White House press briefing.
Right, exactly. Like it's just you're not really getting, and this is also goes into like TV and print have different needs. They want a quick sound bite. We're writing some story where I need some detailed answer on something, and everybody else is like, oh, why are we talking about like your third down blitz package or whatever? But the bottom line is, if you are going to, as teams, as organizations, as sports, restrict access and focus more on your own media, on having your own people cover your team so you can have favorable coverage, and on really building a wall between people, then it's going to go more this way. We are heading toward athletes, and certainly social media is part of this, but we're heading toward athletes just doing their own things. We're heading toward people making their own documentaries about themselves that are favorable, Michael Jordan, that don't really touch on actual issues. Fab Five, documentary. I mean, like, we're headed toward where, you know what? My media is going to be me doing it, the team or the individual, and you're all iced out. And that's just a bad place to be. But Osaka is getting way too much, to me, of the blame for just really this is not some out of nowhere thing, really. This is how things are going. And she has her own situation. But there's a larger issue here of, including the French Tennis Federation and the sport at large, okay, it's this or it's nothing, versus having actual. I mean, look, I can go into Preds post game where it's like question, you're out, and it's hard to get any information or get to know people. Now, granted, during a year you can do that and have a little bit of time, as you guys who cover the team on a daily basis know. Like, the NFL mandates these open locker room situations, which are very helpful, but I'm worried about that and where that's going. And right now there's negotiations there too. I mean, the bottom line is you got to allow access. There's going to be some trolls and idiots and things like that, but you are giving them a better form if all you provide are these massive press conference situations. So that is one of the bigger issues that I think people are missing here.
Well, I think, and to that point, I mean, we're seeing, and this is really happening a lot in the NBA too, of, whether it's players doing podcasts or, the Players Tribune has come out as well. I mean, it's much different now, and I don't think we're ever going back to kind of getting away from that. Like, it's never going to go back and be the same. But I do think, to your point, there is, and this is happening really in all sports now, there is a realization from professional sports teams that if they want favorable media coverage and they want to kind of get their own story out there and have to deal with as little backlash as possible, that they're going to really focus in on hiring their own media and, churning stories out through their own media, churning opportunities out through their own media. And to your point, like, it's not all bad. Like, I don't think that everything that comes out from, team-spun media is bad. There have been some really good stories. I mean, heck, the Predators have done some really good stories with, Brooks and Thomas Willis that I feel have been awesome, and they've done a great job. But I do think when you get into this area of no negative press is good and you're trying to avoid that at all costs, I don't think that serves the fan overly well.
No, and right. I mean, listen, I like the Players Tribune stuff. I think there's some fascinating stuff that you get from people from their perspective. But there's also people out there who want to tell good stories. And if all they have are, these situations like you have apparently with tennis as a sport right now, it's harder and harder to do that. So I think there's room for all of it. You're right. We're never going back. I mean, these teams, colleges, they've all invested in their websites, things like that, and that's fine. There's a lot of good stuff out of it, but it can't just be that. I mean, independent media, to me, is still important for fans, and it doesn't have to be this, look at me and my tough question all the time stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are tough questions that need to be asked, and they're not going to be asked by, the in-house media. So it's and that's just the thing that I thought of with this that I think people aren't thinking about enough versus, her particular situation. She is not there's going to be more of this, and there really has been some more of this. Like you said, I mean, Kyrie Irving is another guy who has kind of said, I'm not talking to you guys anymore, things like that. I think that there's a benefit. The problem is also with coaches. I think more and more we have coaches who are just like, you know what, I'm just not going to deal with it. I think the smart coaches are the ones who say, I actually want media who cover me to know what's happening because it's better for me that people are knowledgeable about the situation versus just throwing crap at the wall. But it's going the wrong way.
That is today's edition of the Rex Rant, a special Tuesday edition of the Rex Rant, usually every Monday at 7:45 here on Robby and Rexrode. When we come back, we'll be joined by Gentry Estes from the Tennessee, and we'll get into some Titans talk with him, the Julio Jones situation, also a little bit of Predators as well. Where do the Predators go from here? All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Third hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And we are pleased to go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend Gentry Estes from the Tennessee. And Gentry, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
Hey, I'm good. Good morning. Good to be with you guys.
Good to have you with us. And Gentry, we've talked a lot in the last couple of weeks about Julio Jones and the possibility that he could end up with the Tennessee Titans, and Mike Florio over the weekend coming out saying the general's kind of feeling around the league is right now is that he ends up with the Titans. Obviously, nobody knows yet for sure at this point. What do you think of all this? And if you're the Titans, what are you comfortable parting ways with in order to acquire the services of Julio Jones?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the big question, because the meat to what Florio reported was that the Titans were going to end up trading a second-round pick eventually. That was the word he used, was eventually. I thought that was interesting because this seemed to me like the Falcons are trying to up the price. They're advertising and saying to other teams, okay, if you can do better than that, you can get Julio Jones. I mean, I don't know what the market looks like for Julio Jones in terms of a first-round pick or how much interest you're getting from other teams. Good as he is, you're still talking about a receiver in his early 30s who makes a ton of money, has a history of injuries here recently. So you could see where, maybe you don't get a first-round pick for that. So when you're with the Titans, I've always thought with this, they're in an interesting position with the Falcons just because of how well the Falcons staff knows the Titans team. There would be some avenues there in terms of, hey, maybe Dean Pease wants Rashaan Evans. Maybe Arthur Smith has a few guys on the offense that we don't know about that he really likes. That could be added to this, where the Titans could maybe send some salary back and also sweeten the deal for the Falcons, maybe in a way some other teams couldn't. But I think the next few days are going to be really interesting in terms of how the rest of the league feels about this, because it does appear that the Titans are interested, but I don't think they're going to pay up for it.
So, and judging from your writing, you're pretty bullish on this as an idea for the Titans, Gentry. But I guess where would you draw the line in terms of willingness, to give up this or that, and also the idea of maybe giving up more if they'll take on some of that contract?
Yeah, the big concern for me was the money, and I think that's probably pretty widespread around the NFL right now. You're asking teams in a reduced cap situation to take on all this money that they weren't planning to otherwise. And teams have really, including the Titans, really been struggling and trying to make moves to create cap space this whole time, parting ways with some players they probably wouldn't have otherwise. So now you're asking teams to accelerate that process. The question for me was what the Titans would even be interested. Was that going to be a non-starter for them? And the fact that they continue to be mentioned in all these reports about Julio, there does appear to be some interest. It wasn't a non-starter. So that is, however it works out with the money, there appears to be a sense that the Titans can do it. And if they can do it, then I think now you figure out what the best option is. I tend to think if you look at, let's say, how the Jadeveon Clowney situation played out last year, the Titans were interested for months, but they weren't going to chase him. The market eventually came to where they wanted it to be. They ended up paying Jadeveon too much for the production, obviously, but they got him on a one-year deal. They got him on the terms they wanted. And I tend to think this would be similar. And to me, I wouldn't give up a first-round pick for Julio. Second round sounds a little bit right, but there needs to be some other issue. There needs to be some other parts of that deal that ease the salary cap hit, and I think there would be.
Gentry Estes from the Tennessean on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And Gentry, I mean, that brings up, another part of this conversation too is the tight end position for the Titans as well. With all this hoopla around Julio Jones, right now you've got Anthony Ferkser at tight end and Jeff Swaim, and that's pretty much it in terms of proven guys that you feel good about. What do you think of how the Titans are going to go about handling the tight end position from here, and how much would that factor into this discussion of Julio Jones and the money that comes along with that as well?
Well, I was about to say, I mean, if someone would have said for weeks, the Titans are going to make a trade with the Falcons, I would have been like, oh yeah, for Hayden Hurst.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, really, to bring him in, given who the Falcons drafted with Pitts. But the Titans are going to have to do something, aren't they? I mean, are you really comfortable with Anthony Ferkser as your number one tight end? That's nothing against Anthony Ferkser. The guy was really productive the last couple of years. Certainly, great value for the team. But you're talking about an offense that's leaned a lot on the tight ends here the last couple of years, and that's a pretty glaring need. As you exit the draft, I think the Titans had a good draft class, but that was needed a tight end and didn't get one. That's still a real problem.
No doubt. So, Gentry, we've been talking some about the Preds here in the aftermath of the 4-2 loss to the Hurricanes. What may be coming here, the expansion draft, who needs to be re-signed, extended, cut, traded. If you're waving a magic wand to get this team to actual contention anytime soon, what would you do?
I would have Seattle take Johansson or Duchesne in the expansion draft.
Yes.
Which one?
and free up the cap space, and then I just feel like we talked rebuild this whole season, and I think even if some wheels started moving in that direction, that's still your big hurdle is some of the contracts you're dealing with, these long-term deals, those $8 million deals with those two guys, and until you find a solution for that, I mean you're going to really be hamstrung by that as the cap stays flat in the NHL, I think.
So, Gentry, with that in mind, as you look at this run for the Predators, I mean, they win 20 of 28 to close out the regular season. A really good team, obviously, in Carolina in the first round of the playoffs. They take them 6 games. 4 of those games go into overtime. Like, how do you kind of evaluate this season if you're David Poile and the Predators, given the really bad, basically rock bottom that we saw halfway through, and then the run to close out the end where Saros is playing out of his mind, and you give a really good run to a Carolina team that could still do some damage in the playoffs? I mean, how do you kind of evaluate whether or not this season was a success and how close you are if you're David Poile and the Predators?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I do think that the Predators played awfully well in the playoffs against a very good team. I think a lot of how that played out, you give credit to the other guys. I mean, my gosh, I think the Canes had 10 game-tying goals in those 6 games.
Yeah.
It seemed like every time the Preds inched ahead or got any kind of advantage, Carolina nullified it or caught them almost immediately in some cases. And that was a team I was impressed with. Carolina. That was a team that continued to step up and showed their own resiliency, which has been I think a strength for Nashville all season. But it goes back to this though. This is a team that almost won the Stanley Cup, but then after that won the President's Trophy. There was an elite team, a team that had established itself at that point in its progression in the NHL. Now, in the last few years, the Predators have gone from a team that's capable of having the best record in the league to a team that, everybody sure is happy about their effort in losing in the first round. And it just seemed the whole time, Carolina was a better team. But, you go into that saying, Nashville was such underdogs, and it's like, a moral victory. And you've just sensed a regression in the franchise, and it's continued to do that, to go that way. And as good as the end of this season was, it was needed because of how bad it was for a couple of months. And I just feel like it's hard. I feel like they're headed in the wrong direction still, only because of where they were to where they are now.
Talking to Gentry Estes, great columnist for the Tennessean. And Gentry, I ask you this because I'm struggling with this right now. How are you dividing up the Nashville regional, the Knoxville regional? Pretty crazy that we're talking about a number 3 national seed, number 4 national seed in the same state, rivals, Vanderbilt and Tennessee. And also, what do you think about both teams' chances of getting to Omaha?
Yeah, that's going to be fun to divide that up there, Joe. Are you going to go to Omaha for about 10 days when they both go?
Definitely not that. Oh, gosh, if they both, though. Oh, man, if
Yeah,
they both
you'll
go.
be there.
Oh, boy. Well, I was going to go later.
We're the center of college baseball all of a sudden, I guess. I mean, I think Vanderbilt is as good as they usually are. I think with those two pitchers, I think it would be a pretty big upset for anybody to knock them out in any super regional, having to face those two guys the first 2 days. I think they're maybe not as complete as they've been in past years, but awfully good and good enough to go to Omaha. With Tennessee, it's a very good team. They're a clutch team. They always seem to produce, in situations, these dramatic victories, and they've really got the fan base behind them over there. I mean, this is it'll be interesting to see because I think Vanderbilt is the type of team that is used to this and knows how to play at this time of year and will be very composed. And, it's kind of the norm for that program. But at Tennessee, it's not at all. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes, where this is a team that doesn't really know what it's, it doesn't have a lot of experience this time of year in their program here for a number of years. And, I think there'll be more excitement probably around that team because of that. But I think you maybe know a little bit better what to expect with Vandy.
Gentry Estes from the Tennessean has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Does a great job for the Tennessean, covering all things Middle Tennessee sports here in our area. Gentry, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you taking time to come on with us this morning.
You bet. Take care, guys.
Absolutely. We'll come back, react a little bit to what Gentry had to say there, get back into the Tennessee Titans as well. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. 1025 The Game and the Nashville Predators will host a 615-day celebration at Ford Ice Center Bellevue June the 15th and will benefit the Boys and Girls Clubs of Middle Tennessee. This all-day event will feature fun for the whole family while paying tribute to Nashville's annual 615 Day, an occasion that pairs Music City's area code with the date of June 15th. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Thanks to Gentry Estes from the Tennessean for joining us in the last segment. We'll have Chris Mason, Preds TV analyst, coming up at 8:30 here in about 12, 13 minutes or so. So looking forward to that conversation coming up with him. And one of the things we got to there with Gentry was the Julio Jones situation that continues to be involved with the Titans. And Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk coming out over the weekend saying, quote, "In league circles, the current expectation is that eventually the Falcons will send Jones to the Titans for a second-round pick. This isn't a report the Titans have offered or will offer a second-round pick, or that the Falcons will take a second-round pick for Jones. They continue to want a first-rounder." Florio goes on to say that this is kind of undercutting the report that ESPN threw out there that the Falcons have a 2022 first-round pick on the table, which, as you pointed out, Joe, kind of sounds like maybe ESPN got that report from the Falcons. Maybe a little trying to drive up that price a little bit that we see very often in these reports.
I can't imagine that the Falcons have a first-round pick on the table and aren't jumping at the deal. Unless it's like, yeah, we'll give you a first and you pay 12 of the $15 million cap it this year. I mean, I suppose there's always a possibility that there's the other parts of the deal don't add up. But, man, if someone actually offers them a first-round pick for Julio Jones, I'd advise them to jump on that.
And we said, June 1st being a day in the NFL where some moves could start to happen and some finagling could start to take place. This coming from Field Yates from ESPN. The Buffalo Bills have converted $11.7 million of Stephon Diggs' base salary into a signing bonus, which creates about $7.8 million in cap space for this season, which makes me think that Buffalo is up to something and maybe a move about to happen for the Bills.
Julio to Buffalo.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's Julio to Buffalo.
And Diggs.
That'd be a pretty good one too.
Well, and that is essentially the same move the Titans could do in terms of Tannehill's converting to bonus, and then you reduce the cap hit this year. You don't get rid of it. You push it down the road. But when you may be able to handle it better when the cap goes up, things like that. So I mean, there's certainly a case to be made to create it that way, and it's not like it hurts him. I mean, he's just he just gets converted to bonus. I mean, he's going to get paid. So certainly, I think this is a possibility for the Titans, and if that does happen, then that would tell you if that move comes first. Oh, imagine the Julio excitement out there.
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm all here for it. But it keeps to me going back to, and this is what we talked about with Gentry as well. If you get Julio in here, I don't think anybody's got a problem with that, obviously. You would love to see what this offense could look like with Julio Jones. But if you get Julio in here, what does that mean for the tight end position? Because right now, it's Anthony Ferkser, it's Jeff Swaim. We talked earlier in the show, Michael Pruitt looks like he is visiting with the 49ers tomorrow. So it doesn't look like Michael Pruitt is going to be back at this point. That could change, obviously. But that's just the way it looks now. Are you comfortable going into the season, even if you do have Julio Jones, with Anthony Ferkser as your number one tight end? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I know a lot of Titans fans kind of raise their eyebrow at that and say, I don't know about that. He's a good player. I don't think he's a number one tight end type player.
Right. Hey, maybe A.J. Brown can play some tight end.
Maybe so.
I like to see A.J. Brown as an inline
Darrington
blocker.
Evans.
Blow somebody up. Well, that's the thing. So maybe you need to create this room with Tannehill's deal and then create even more room and bring in Julio and Zach Ertz and have the greatest offense ever.
Maybe so.
100% vintage Zach Ertz, 100% vintage Julio Jones.
Well, what do you think the Bills are
What could
doing?
stop you? I don't know. What are the Bills doing?
I don't know.
I haven't really heard them in the –
Could they get Ertz? Could they get Jones? I mean, this does feel like – and I think this is part of why the Falcons are kind of operating this way. Like, obviously, they want a first-round pick.
Yeah, get all these AFC teams all riled up.
Yeah, they want AFC teams bidding against each other. Like, if you're the Titans, like the worst-case scenario for the Titans would be, Julio Jones ends up on the Colts. They don't want to see that happen.
And the Colts don't want to see Julio Jones on the Titans.
Yeah, I can tell you. So, I mean, it makes sense from the Falcons' point of view to start getting these teams into a bidding war. It's still difficult for me to believe that at some point one of these teams is going to come off of a first-round pick for Julio Jones. It's just my guess.
No, again, unless that comes with
A lot
massive help from the Falcons, which is a kid. The whole point, the Falcons are trying to unload this. But, yeah, if you're the Falcons, you can get a first out of this. Feeling pretty good at this point. 32-year-old Julio Jones with a lot of money left on his deal.
And Florio goes on in this report, and he's talking about, the Titans eventually giving a second-round pick as the thought process in the NFL. But at what point in this report, Florio says, as one source with knowledge of the dynamics explained it last night, there's a very good chance that someone has put a 2022 first-round pick on the table in exchange for Jones plus more, possibly as much as a 2022 second-round pick. That's interesting. I don't know if I'm the Falcons if I'm doing that.
Well, that's the thing. Look, could be that the Falcons are out there, telling Diana Rossini there's a first-round pick and there's no first-round pick. But it also could just be that there's a first-round pick and there's a whole bunch else to the thing. Yeah. So there is, but there's also this and this and this. And so because it would have to be this and this and this for them not to just jump all over that, I think.
Well, also Rossini coming out and saying that the Seahawks have been in contact as well, and all of a sudden Russell Wilson and Julio Jones are having conversations about what it would be like to play together. This is it's going to be interesting to see how quickly this gets handled by the Falcons here. It's June 1st. We've talked about the difference in being able to kind of spread the money out via the cap after June 1st, after today, and kind of moving forward here, expecting to see some movement throughout the NFL. I'm interested to see how quickly this resolves itself with Julio Jones and the Falcons. And also, like if that doesn't work for the Titans and Julio Jones is not the route that you go, what do you do coming up here? To me, if it's not Julio Jones, it's got to be a tight end. Like, I understand. I'm probably, at least to some level, I'm willing to just go with Anthony Ferguson if that means that Julio Jones is on the other side. I don't know that there's another receiver out there right now that I'd be comfortable doing that with. Like, you have to have a tight end over the middle to catch the ball.
Yeah. Again, if you've been saying this, I mean, if you just look at the positional urgency, I don't think it's close. I mean, I think tight end is – I understand the receiver depth. You're relying on heavily on a Josh Reynolds, on a Dez Fitzpatrick coming in as a rookie. If A.J. Brown were to go down, you'd be awfully thin there in terms of experience and production in this league. But tight end, you don't have – an all-around tight end. Anthony Ferguson is going to be an important guy for this team, no doubt. But to me, he's a tight end / slot receiver. You need an all-around. You need a full-time starting inline blocking tight end who also can catch the ball. Thought they were going to draft one. They didn't draft one. Julio Jones or not. I mean, I think you're right. Like if you get Julio Jones. Does that mean now, you can just forget tight end? No. But, I mean, I think you're right. It minimizes the concern because it's like, okay, well, look at all these. Look at this abundance of riches. Yes. But I still think you need, and maybe one of these undrafted rookies will be good. Briley Moore from Kansas State was a really good player in college, but that's putting a lot on some unproven players.
And you brought this up earlier in the show. It is kind of weird that Jared Pinkney doesn't show up to the OTAs there. It's a different offseason, and the NFLPA, they don't want their players showing up to the voluntary workouts. I understand all that. And maybe something's going on with Jared Pinkney that I don't know about. So I'm always kind of hesitant to get into these discussions. But you would think in somebody in his position, especially looking at this roster right now and the opportunity that could be in front of you, that's a place you might want to be this offseason if you're Jared Pinkney, his OTAs, coming in and getting as much work with this team and with this staff as you possibly can.
Yeah, I would have advised him to absolutely show up.
Yeah.
Because those other guys you're going to be fighting for roster spots against were out there. And I think Pinkney's an interesting player, guy who, going back to college, I always thought he looked like a guy who could play at this level. The Falcons cut him. He's got a real opportunity here, and no way does that help him. So the position is just it's still, to me, bigger concern than receiver. But I suppose you get Julio Jones and
Can Julio play tight
whatever
end?
else. It's all gravy. I think
Seth Jones is going to come in and play center for the Predators, and Julio is going to be the starting tight end.
there you go.
That's what we figured out today on the show.
Hey, why not? Versatility. Julio and A.J. Brown, those guys are receivers who block, by the way.
That is true.
Receivers who block. They can play a little tight end.
We know how important that is. That's for sure.
Like Taysom Hill, right? I'm sure
Hey,
he's
if
a good
Taysom
blocker,
Hill
right?
can do everything, then Julio Jones can do everything.
Yeah.
You tell me Julio Jones isn't a better football player than Taysom Hill? I didn't think so.
So who do you want to win the Saints starting quarterback job, by the way?
Oh, man, can it be both? Can I get Jameis Winston
it
and Taysom Hill?
probably
I
will
kind
be
of want
both,
both. Yeah, I kind of want to throw both out there. Jameis Winston can't throw 30 picks in a season if he's not taking all the snaps.
True.
So in order to minimize that, you got to play Taysom Hill a little bit.
Taysom
I'm
will
here for all
get
chaos.
he'll get him some snaps this year at quarterback. I'm
he
confident in that.
He absolutely will. Sean Payton's still the coach. Taysom Hill's getting his snaps.
Very exciting times for Saints fans.
Sure that is. And, hey, you can see it in person this year at Nissan Stadium.
That's right. The 17th game.
And they'll be in town. That's for sure. Looking forward to that coming up. When we come back, we will get back into the Predators. Preds TV analyst Chris Mason will join us coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
I don't have high confidence. What's that? So hopefully he answers the phone. I don't have high confidence.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Talking Nashville Predators, and to help us do that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Preds TV analyst Chris Mason, brought to you by Coleman Tractor and by Smoky Mountain Tops as well. C-Mace, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
Not too much. Just trying to find out what to do with my life now that hockey's over, but just enjoyed the nice weekend and, yeah, just hanging out.
Hey, I'm right there with you, my friend, trying to figure out what to do with all this spare time that all of a sudden is on my hands. See, Mace, we'll get to the Predators coming up here in just a second. I do want to get your thoughts very quickly on yet another collapse by the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're up 3-1 in the series. They find a way to screw this thing up again and lose in the first round of the playoffs with Matthews and Marner and Tavares and all the different riches of talent they have there in Toronto. What did you think of that and Shea Weber and the Canadians coming back winning that series?
Is it bad that I kind of like that?
I enjoyed every second of it.
I don't. You know, honestly, it's crazy because, I mean, you guys know what the media is like up there, especially with that team. You know, they get off to the great start in the series, and this is finally the year we're talking Stanley Cup and, you know, all those types of things. And I don't know what it is, but that team has done that a few times over the last few years, or they've had a series, you know, a stranglehold on a series, and they've somehow, you know, they think it's over. And, you know, Montreal, like, they played, you got to give them a lot of credit. They were down out. Even in that game, I think they were up 3-0 or 3-1, and Toronto came back, and Montreal ended up winning in overtime, and right there, that's when the old pucker factor kicks in, and everyone's like, "Uh-oh, is this going to happen again?" And you're like, "No, Toronto's too good. Little bump in the road, they'll get it in Montreal," and then you go to Montreal and down to a Game 7. That's why, like, if the Preds could have got to a Game 7, you just never know. So it's tough. I mean, I don't know. As an organization, you feel like you have all the pieces. You addressed, you know, your goaltending, which used to be their issue, and then it used to be defense. They've addressed that, and it just didn't work. But that's a testament to how good this league is, in my opinion. The teams that, you know, are at the bottom and not the top seeds, I don't think are always given enough credit, and, you know, that doesn't always happen. But, you know, hats off to Webby and the Canadians, because they everyone else thought they were done, but they didn't, and they ended up coming back, and big upset. So it's that you know, that emoji where you're like, uh-oh. That's what that is for me. I was like, oh man, no, that's a tough one. That one hurts.
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff. I also think, C-Mace, it is another example of goaltending mattering so much, right, at this time of year, which does bring it back to the Preds. I feel like I would think everyone would be able to agree, as much conversation as there is on the direction of things and who may be traded and unprotected, all that stuff. The Preds did find a goalie this year. Maybe they didn't find him. Maybe he was just, this was going to happen all along. But to me, I felt like UC Saros proved something down the stretch this season and in that playoff series. What about you? Do you feel like he cemented himself here? And what do you think the future is for Saros?
Oh, 100%. I think if you go back to the season before, you know, when they were going to do more of a split, but Pekka was still the guy. And as that season went on, you know, he took over at the end of the season in, you know, February, March, and he was, you know, playing starter number one type goalie minutes. But it's, you know, you're not necessarily deemed the guy yet. You know, you don't have that pressure. You don't have to carry that around where, hey, you're the number one guy. You're just, you know, a goalie that's, you know, the 1A, 1B, and you're going to maybe get 35, 40% of the starts, but you got hot, so the team ran with you. I've been in that situation as a backup, and it's a different type of a feeling. There's not as much pressure. You're hot and you're going kind of thing. And this year was a lot different because he came in and he was the guy. You know, this was the first year that they've ever, you know, really, I guess, publicly said in the media that, you know, Saros is our guy. We're gonna go with him. We believe in him, and for him to respond the way that he did as the season went on, and there's a bit of an adjustment, just like the whole team kind of went through. But personally, I think for Saros, it's a different kind of mentality and a feeling when you come to the rink every day, and you know that, when you go out and you play a bad game, that you're going to have to play again, and you're going to have to find a way to turn around, and you're going to have to find a way to, put long stretches of, elite play together to be, credible and to have that, earn that title. And I think the way that he handled himself, first of all, getting out of that hole and then going on that stretch that he went on right till the last game for over 2.5 months, that's what the good guys can do. That's what, everyone in the league is good and they can have their moments, but the elite guys, the star goaltenders in the league are able to do it for longer stretches of time and recover quicker from bad performances or bad stretches. And I think Saros, in my mind, I've always known that he's had the ability to be a number one and a top goaltender in this league. And now after seeing what he did in the last half of the season, I really don't have any doubt in my mind that, they've got their goaltender for many years.
Preds TV analyst Chris Mason on with us, brought to you by Coleman Tractor and by Smoky Mountain Tops. So, C-Mace, now kind of the interesting part of this discussion comes up where I think David Poyle and the front office here has an interesting challenge on their hand, trying to determine exactly how close the Predators are to being a Stanley Cup contender. I mean, we talked about the contracts that have been signed, and you're still, hoping, if you just said this, talked about this 2-3 years ago, you're still in the window to win a cup now in 2021. As you look at this season, the way it unfolded, the playoff series against Carolina, you factor everything in that we've seen. How close do you think this Predators team is right now, this group is right now, to getting back to a place where they can compete for a Stanley Cup?
Well, I think this offseason is going to be massive in my opinion, because I'm very curious to see how they're going to approach the expansion draft. This is everyone's second time around, so there's going to be obviously a lot of moving pieces. There's going to be, deals made of unloading contracts to Seattle, and to, there's just going to be a lot of moving parts this year. And I think, to me, with the emergence, I guess, of some of the younger players, it definitely gives them a lot more flexibility, I think, as an organization, to feel good about, maybe being a little bit risky, or maybe taking some chances in the off season, or, potentially moving some salary or whatever the case may be, because, there's so many young kids that have really, quite honestly, in my opinion, cemented themselves as NHL players, where in a regular season, if they didn't have the injuries that they did this year, for the extended period of times that they did, there'd be a lot of guys we still don't probably know about. And, the fact that I think Tomasino went down and he had a great year in the American Hockey League, that's another, potential big name, big, cog in the wheel moving forward for this team. So, in terms of being a contender, they still don't have the top four. However, that plays out in the, protection side of things for the expansion draft. That'll be yet to be seen. But, the fact that Carrier came in, and to me, obviously he was a top four guy. There are games when Yossi and Ekholm and I think even Ellis were in the lineup, and he played more minutes than anybody. So to me, he's a player that I look at and I think, well, this guy, and he's going to cost a lot less than some of the other guys. So I think they're in a good spot contender-wise. I mean, I don't know. There's so many good teams. I guess the divisions will go back to normal next year. We can expect that. So, I don't know as much as I should about, the rest of our, division, I guess it is. But I think they're right there. I think they're right there. And believe me, we've all said this too. Anybody that gets in can win a cup. But, there's only, I guess, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams that I would say that are the real contenders. And this offseason will have a lot to do with how I feel about that. But I don't think that they're, out of the mix by any means.
Is it as simple, C-Mace, as they've just got to get more consistent production from, top 6 forwards? And then in tandem with that question, how important do you think Granlund being re-signed is for this team?
Well, I think that, that top 6 production, the health and the reliability of those players is so important, because at the end of the day, you structure your team on a salary cap, and you expect certain production from the guys that are getting paid in the bracket they're getting paid in. And if you don't get that, it makes tough. It's asking a lot of the, depth guys, which Predators have, built their team that way, and they seem to get a lot of great production up and down the lineup. But at the end of the day, you need that consistency, to win hockey games, to have a good power play, to be in the upper echelon, I feel. And, Mikhail Granlund's a guy that he does everything. He embodies, in my opinion, what John Hines wants the team to be. Hard to play against, hardest working, relentless, good defensively. He's got offensive, he can contribute offensively. I think he's a guy that if, I'm building a team, character-wise, and what he does on the ice is somebody that I'd really want on my team. So I think he's an important piece, because even when the team was struggling, and even when they're, trying to search for their identity, he never changed. That's who he is. He's that type of player. And I think every team in the league wants a guy like that. So I'm hopeful that can get worked out, but I know the business side of things, and, there might be opportunity out there for him, but you never know how that plays out. So he's a guy that, I'm definitely looking at if, I want to, keep my team's mojo or whatever it is, and that identity. That's one guy that I think, any team would be happy to have. There's no doubt about that.
No shortage of decisions to make for David Poile coming up this summer. There's no question about that. C-Mace, great stuff as always. Appreciate you taking time to join us this morning, man.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Absolutely, you as well. Chris Mason joins us every Tuesday at 8:30, brought to you by Coleman Tractor and by Smoky Mountain Tops as well. Let's get your thoughts on the Predators. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. How close are the Predators to being a contender? What's the biggest question facing the Predators heading in to this offseason? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5. The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, streaming live on Periscope, on Twitch, and on YouTube as well. Thanks to Chris Mason for joining us in the last segment. Taking your thoughts on the Predators, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. George, our buddy George Scoville texting in on the text line. The Preds have done a great job over many years keeping it in the family when it comes to management and scouting, rewarding loyalty to a fault, it seems. What does the availability of, for example, Stanley Cup winner Jim Rutherford do to David Poyle's shelf life? How much longer do his roster experiments have left to play out? This comes from George on the text line.
Yeah, so I think one thing we saw this year, I think we saw with the young guys coming up, and I think in a few instances, kind of a validation of the entire process they have going on. I mean, I feel like they've found a lot of good players. They've scouted a lot of good players. They developed a lot of good players. I mean, the real issue is just as simple as some of Poyle's big deals that haven't worked in the last few years.
Yes.
I mean, it really is that simple. It's just his decision to go all in on Turris, his decision to trade a first for Ryan Hartman, his decision to go all in on Matt Duchene. So those to me aren't like an indictment of the entire scouting network and everything, right? I mean, I think this year, again, kind of was a reminder that they've done a good job. That said, I don't disagree that like he should be evaluated and it should be on the table that, you know, the Preds could move on from him this year or down the road. And then you get to the question of who makes that call. It's not like teams that have one owner who gets angry and says, okay, I'm moving on from this GM or this coach.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But I also think when you look at this situation with Poyle, to me, the way they closed out the season and the playoff showing that they had, and just I think the general feeling of optimism around some of these young pieces that you have coming into this year, like I don't think there's any way that he's not back next year.
I don't either.
Like I think he's going to be the GM. Now, look, I mean, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure this out. David Poyle is not going to have a whole lot longer left at this job. I mean, he's 70 years old at this point, so I mean, he's not going to be here for the next 20 years or anything like that. But I do think we got to the point halfway through this season where you started to look at David Poyle and John Hines and we're wondering, like, could this be a total rebuild? Like, could this be stripped down to the bottom? Roster parts are moving on. The front office may be moving on. Maybe the coaching staff moving on as well. And to their credit, I mean, they turned it around. And I think you feel a lot better about where this team is now than you did halfway through February, early part of March. That being said, and Adam Vingan brought this up in his article on The Athletic yesterday too, I still believe like a dose of realism is necessary for the Predators as they approach this offseason. I still, as impressive as that run was, and I think as great as you feel about Saros moving forward, I do not classify the Predators as a Stanley Cup contender right now. I think there's a lot of work to do before they're back in that echelon of being a Stanley Cup contender. And like you've talked about, a lot of that has to do with you're paying two guys right now $16 million per season collectively. They're just not bringing you much. They're not bringing you much down the middle. And we know how important that position is specifically when it comes to winning. Now, I say that, and Steve Levy from ESPN tweeted this out earlier today. 17 of the top 18 highest paid players in the NHL are watching the rest of the playoffs from home now, heading into the second round. So there is that. That's an interesting part of this discussion as well.
So what you're saying is just go all herd line.
Just herd line the whole time.
Herd line, 4 lines of herd line.
Cheapest route possible.
Hardest team to play against in the league, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an amazing stat. I mean, the thing with Poyle is, and his job, like, to me, you don't even consider it unless there's someone else out there that you say, okay, that person can be a better GM right now than David Poyle.
Well, I think that's why George brought up Jim Rutherford.
I'm right. So if there's someone out there you say, you know what, that's the visionary we need right now, okay. But again, who is making that judgment? I mean, the ownership group collectively? And then who's making the move?
Yeah.
He's going to be back next year. I just think that it's problematic if he isn't as scrutinized as any other GM in pro sports should be scrutinized.
I agree. I think it's got to be the case if you're the Predators, not only this offseason, but as you move forward as well. Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texter that says, I think the Preds can compete against anyone and beat anyone, but they can't do it consistently. Watching the Avalanche play the other night, it made me think we have a ton of work to do, and that starts with entertaining and exploring free agency. Seth Jones would be a huge step forward, and we need to let go of a certain players that just aren't producing at the same level anymore. It does kind of feel like at times you're watching a different sport when the Avalanche are out there. That's unbelievable what they did the other night against Vegas.
I mean, then it becomes the story becomes just the Ryan, all that stuff with the Reeves and everything, which was just terrible. But my goodness, they are sick.
Nathan McKinnon is Predators fans going to be happy to see him back in the division next year. That'll be fun.
The Punch and Judy Avalanche, Jared. Am I right?
That's right.
We saw the beginnings.
We did
in 2018 of what this thing has become, and man,
I will say I called the
ridiculous.
Avalanche before the season to win the Stanley Cup.
And last year
I
called
called the
Tampa
Lightning
Bay
to win the Stanley Cup.
Are you are you fan-dueling this stuff well in advance?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, good for you.
There could be a hefty return on the way if Colorado finishes.
Well
this
done.
off.
Well,
I like your chances.
they look amazing right now. But yeah, that is. You look at them and you're like, this team's a contender. Wasn't that long ago, a lot of these same guys were on, as Gentry S just brought up earlier in the show. I mean, they were on an elite team. They were part of an elite team. They were the foundation of an elite team, but they just aren't anymore. And the texter there brings up what everyone is talking about, but like you can't just move on unless you want to keep buying people out.
Yeah.
You're paying $2 million a year for the next few.
That's just not going to happen.
To get Kalturis to go away. You're not going to buy out anybody else, so you can wipe that from the possibilities.
Got another texter that says, ever since they overpaid for Shea, they have put all their money on a concentration of players and destroyed our ability to have depth for years. It's time to start spreading the money out and keeping a team that is dangerous for years. There's a reason these big teams stay good for years, and depth is a huge answer to that. That sounds great, but you eventually, when you have players that produce for you, you either pay them or you lose them.
Exactly.
You have to identify the right players to pay and the right players to let walk.
This team actually does have depth. Rocco Grimaldi is just sitting there, collecting dust in the playoffs. Tolvanen sits out. Fabro sits out. I mean, this team has depth. It doesn't have the production needed from the people who get paid a lot of money. And like you said, you either pay people or not. I mean, I want depth if I have a hockey team, but I will take top-line stars who play like it over depth.
Well, also, look, I mean, I think it's relatively easy to look back at the Duchesne contract and have more of an issue with that one because I tried to warn people about this at the time. I mean, Matt Duchesne is not an $8 million a year player.
But you warned people that he'd only be about a 55, 60-point guy, right?
Yes, I did. And he's not even that at this point.
That sounds great right now.
That sounds awesome right now. It's still not worth $8 million.
Right.
But that sounds awesome.
But that's
right
at
now.
least in the neighborhood.
Exactly. I think you have to also, when you're having this discussion, you got to look back and figure out when these contracts were signed, too. Like, Ryan Johansson is making $8 million per year. Ryan Johansson signed his contract after he got hurt in the Stanley Cup final and was the best player the Predators had leading up to that point. Was a large reason why they were there. Like, there was no way the Predators were letting him walk at that point. I mean, you were re-signing Ryan Johansson, and that was the going rate. Now, it doesn't look great right now. Now, I will argue for about 3-4 years it looked pretty good, that deal that he signed. So I have less of an issue with that one as I do with Duchesne making as much money as he's making.
No, it's been – you had way more return on it because, again, he was great the next year when they won the President's Trophy. And
he was great the year after.
Right. So you've had way more return on it, and I still think you have a better chance based on what I've seen in 2 years. In the last 2 years, I think you have a better chance of getting more return on it than on Duchesne.
You do, and it's on him at this point. Like, he's got to be better in the regular season. There's no excuse, and I get it. You can be better in the playoffs than you are in the regular season, and that's good. If that ends up happening, there should not be this much of a difference between Johansson in the regular season and Johansson in the playoffs. That's got to stop.
I agree. But, like, with Duchesne, 19 points in 100 games, or 19 goals in 100 games. I apologize.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
Both sound bad.
Yes.
I don't know what the answer is. I'm sure he might say, hey, well, give me more opportunities like I got finally in this series to play with Forsberg and Johansson or whatever. But I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen what he was as a player previously.
No, I haven't seen it either. And, at his age, I mean, you have to start to wonder, are you going to see it
like
at
when
this
you
point?
And that's the thing, he's not old, but when
He's
you
not
get
young either.
When you get into the league at 18, there's still a certain wear and tear factor that starts then. The clock starts then. Even though your age is still good right now,
Sure.
your time logged in this league it's been a while.
He's got some miles, that's for sure. When we come back, we'll get back into the NFL and the Julio Jones situation as well. Our man Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports will join us. That's coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the wholesaling studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. It is that time of the week. We go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in the great, the powerful Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports. Charles, what's going on, brother? How are we doing?
I'm doing well, guys. How you doing this morning?
We are doing great. Appreciate you taking time to join us. And Charles, as you can imagine, it's rumor season around here with Julio Jones, and Titans fans are very fired up. They're not quite as, Tom Brady and Giselle touring local high schools fired up as they were this time a year ago. But Julio Jones generating a lot of attention around here. As you look at the situation going on between Julio and the Falcons, what do you think the asking price is? What do you think the asking price ultimately will be in order to land the services of Julio Jones?
Well, I spoke to someone yesterday, and what they relayed to me was that I can't name the team, but one of the teams that the Falcons was talking to, the ask was a first-round pick plus starting players, 2 starting players specifically. And I can only tell you that is something that was a turnoff. You know, that you want to stop talks pretty quickly with a team. Ask them for a first-round pick and 2 high-caliber starting offensive players, and that turns off talks pretty quickly with the team. So I don't know if Atlanta's thought process in negotiations is, hey, you know, we're just going to ask really big, hoping to maybe get a first-round pick out of this, and you know, that's it. But if they're legitimately looking for a first-round pick plus 2 high caliber, and the names that were given to me were 2 very high caliber starting offensive players, that's just not going to happen. And the other end of this that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, this team clearly had the notion that Julio Jones was going to want a new deal, something that you know, I'm sure would take him probably through the next 3 seasons, you know. And although Julio has a February birthday, let's just remember he's starting the 2021 season 32 years, 7 months. Okay, 2022, 33, 7 months. 2023, you know, 33 in 7 months. So I just don't think you're going to see teams that want to invest that kind of, you know, loot into a player who, you know, physically he's unbelievable, but at the same time you don't know where that ledge is. Not a lot of quarterbacks are playing, you know, late into their 40s. Not a lot of elite level wide receivers are leading the league or being top 5 wide receivers, you know, right into their mid 30s. So now Julio is a different cat. I get it. I understand that. He could definitely be the outlier, but I can only tell you that asking price is going to be a problem for a lot of teams. And if this is just a hunt for a first-round pick, I don't know that the way to do it is to say, hey, we want a first-round pick plus quite a bit extra.
Well, I mean, I guess if you're asking, and without knowing the players in question here, but I mean, if you're, I guess when I even looked at it from the Titans' perspective, if you could send back a veteran or 2, then you're sending some salary back, and you're right. I mean, you're at least cushioning the blow of taking on that cap hit. But I guess if you're talking like big-time players, that's incredible to me that the Falcons would think they can get that kind of haul.
Yeah, and these are really good players, and they're not old players. Like I got to be careful here because I don't want to, you know, I got a source here that I got to, you know, think about. But
just say it in pig Latin, or just give us their initials.
You know? Yeah. Look, I will just say this is, you know, look out there at the teams that have been involved in talking to Julio Jones. There's not a lot of them, okay, and it's one of those teams. So you only have a very, very small handful of teams that have very clearly been linked to this, and it's one of those teams. So and the, you know, the players involved were not, you know, they were youngish, okay? I mean, you're talking late 20s players, you know, starting caliber players on offense, and you know, there's just no way. I mean, let me put it this way. When the terms were told to me, I responded with like 78 laughing emojis. Like I was like, that's the craziest. I couldn't even believe it. I was stunned. And then on top of it, you know, the team had the notion that like this is a guy who wants a new deal. Like he's going to want more money. So you're not dealing. I think that's the first question I would ask before you even get to compensation is, Julio, you're going to come to us and your base salary, without having it right in front of me, I think it's somewhere like 15, you know, what in terms of what wouldn't accelerate on the cap, what the next team carries. It's like 15, somewhere near 11 or 12 the next 2 years after that.
Right.
that is sub-market for wide receivers, absolutely. There's no question about that. So I think the thought process for Julio Jones, at least the way it was relayed to me, is, he wants like a wide receiver market deal. And it's a lot. So you're giving up, a wide receiver market deal, which is you're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million per season. And, or at least near that, high teens. And then you're going to give up the compensation for it. I don't know. I'm like, that's a deal you do when the guy's, 28, 29 years old, maybe, even younger than that. And you're talking about a guy, again, that's 32 years old plus. Again, he's got a February birthday, so he's almost 33. You're getting a football player you're putting on the field at 2021, in 2021, who's almost 33 years old. Julio Jones is a great player, absolutely great player, but the Falcons, I mean, there's just I understand now. When I heard that, I'm like, this is why there's no traction on this. They've had forever to do this deal. They've had, they've been talking to teams for a while, and this is why the deal's not getting done. And I retweeted Josina Anderson today, who I think she said she quoted a high-level executive or GM or somebody. And that quote, I'm like, yeah, that's legit. Like that, when I read that quote, I'm like, yep, this is exactly what I'm hearing.
To me, if this is hinging on first of all, obviously Julio, I mean, he has limitations here. Everybody's like recruiting him like he's picking a team, right. And he's not. Now, I think there's probably some value. You tell me, some value in the Falcons, making him happy here with his landing spot. When you think about future free agents, stuff like that. But you're telling me that Julio is also going to expect the team to redo his deal in tandem with this. I'd be terrified
just telling you that the team that was talking, to the Falcons clearly left the talks feeling like this was a guy who was going to want a new deal. Now I'm not saying that Julio was saying, that his people were telling, this team like, hey, he's going to want a new deal. But look, when you're an NFL team, anytime you enter into trade talks, particularly when you're giving up any sort of compensation, the first question is, are we going to have to redo your deal? Like, let's at least understand that first, because, the money affects the compensation. I mean, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, the same situation. It's like, hey, you want to go get Aaron Rodgers? Great. But as one general manager said to me, and I thought this was fantastic, he said, look, one of the really scary things about acquiring an Aaron Rodgers now is the Packers have already set your table financially. They've already offered him, if they've offered him the world and then you deal for him, the table's set for you. Like, you now have to give him the world when he gets to you. So you've let another team set the table for you. So, it's a big deal with Julio. You got to find out, like, what exactly does he want financially? And if the truth is, hey, no, he's fine playing on the deal that he's playing on, okay, then that's a different conversation. I don't understand all this talk I see about, well, how much of the contract are the Falcons going to eat and all this stuff. Like, I get that with the depressed cap. Like, teams are like, hey, we don't want to bring on salary, and that will make things a lot more manageable for us. But the Falcons are also sitting there going, we've already paid the option bonus. We've paid out the signing bonus. All you have to deal with is the base salaries the next 3 years, and the base salaries are not horrific, when compared against the wide receiver market. So this is way more complicated than I think people are sort of looking at it, and it would be different if the Falcons are coming to the table saying, hey, it's sort of a fire sale here. We'll just take a second for them. If they were just going to take a second, that would definitely uncomplicate things. But again, this conversation I had yesterday kind of blew my mind. And then when I saw what Josina tweeted today, I was like, yeah, teams are frustrated with the asking price.
Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, Charles, with that in mind, let's just say for the sake of argument that the Titans find a way to get it done and Julio Jones becomes a part of the Titans. As you look at this offense with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown, adding Julio Jones to that mix, what do you think that would do for the Titans in terms of elevating them in the AFC? How much of a contender for the Super Bowl would they be in your mind at that point?
I mean, I can't speak to, I'm going to given how the last couple of off seasons have gone for the Titans, I'm going to measure myself here because I no longer look. I'll be real here. I'm not going to be nice. I mean, I'm going to measure how much faith I have in acquisitions that are made. Like I want to see. Okay, like clearly there have been some bad acquisitions that did not work out. I want to see that the front office is capable of still putting, the right pieces in place. It's been a little bit of a bad run. And so, I want to see how the 2021 offseason moves, and there have been a few, look for this team. Now, you add Julio Jones to that offense, I'll say this. Right now, today, I mean, if it's Julio Jones that we saw last season, it's still absolutely a top 5 wide receiver in the league, and that's massive. And when you look at the teams that are trotting out, Super Bowl contending teams right now, they all have, particularly on offense, at least 2 very, very high-level wideouts and can go up and down the field on you. And I have no doubt that you add them to the mix of the Titans, and I don't know how you deal with Derrick Henry. I don't know how you deal with physical mismatch guys that aren't in awkward positions. Hey, you have a mismatched tight end guy. Okay, that can create a lot of problems. But it's rare to have, just a complete mismatch running back that is a traditional running back. It's rare to have a complete mismatch wide receiver who's just a traditional wide receiver, and that's what the Titans would have. So it would look great, to me, as long as you're getting a guy that's, not going off that cliff. And I can't speak to, wide receivers and skill positions. It's hard to measure really where that cliff is now for some of these guys, and particularly with a guy like Julio Jones, because of what he is physically. You're like, hey, maybe this can be a guy that lasts. I've seen people talk about AJ Green, similar age and same draft, all that, and AJ kind of went off a cliff. And, but I don't know that Julio's going to be that guy just because physically he is so been outside of the norm for almost any other wide receiver.
I'm going to throw real quick at you too, Charles. And to me, the Titans' biggest need, despite all this Julio Jones talk, is at tight end. What do you anticipate? And one guy that I've looked at for a while here, and a lot of people around here have, is Zach Ertz. What do you think is going to happen with him? Are the Eagles intent on trading him, and what do you think about him? 30 years old, serious injury last year, but very productive. 2019. So what do you think about him moving forward?
I think he's still a very productive player. I had a chance to talk to somebody with the Eagles for the draft, and essentially what I was told was, physically they feel like he's fine. He's got several years left in the tank. I don't think they're in a huge rush to move him, although I think Ertz, clearly there's no question, Ertz wants to be dealt, and I think, he feels like, hey, everybody needs a fresh start here. I know the Eagles, I'll say this about the Eagles, they're definitely still active right now in terms of, there's still some lingering free agents out there that I think they're kind of kicking the tires on. Howie Roseman's always, he is a guy who will deal right up until the kickoff, when the season starts. So I think I'd be surprised if I saw him playing for them next year, only because it's clear that the Eagles understand that, he wants a fresh start. I think they're, measuring themselves to see, what kind of compensation they can, potentially get still. But I think if he's dealt, it's going to happen before training camp, and, we'll see what happens at that point. But, that's probably low-key one of the names to watch between now and the end of July.
Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Charles, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Charles Robinson joins us every Tuesday at 9 o'clock here on Robby and Rexrode. When we come back, we'll react a little bit to what Charles had to say. Get your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. What would Julio Jones do to transform this Titans offense? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game. That was the great Charles Robinson from Yahoo Sports joining us in the last segment, breaking down the Julio Jones situation for the Atlanta Falcons. Joe, that's amazing to me. What did you think of that from Charles there, saying that Charles hearing from at least one team the asking price was a first-round pick and 2 starting offensive players? That's a heck of a price that Atlanta's thrown out there if that's the case.
Okay, so he told us it's among the teams that have been popularly thrown out. So what are the teams that have been thrown around in this?
The Titans, I guess the Seahawks.
Patriots.
Would the Ravens count? Because I know,
I guess.
Look, one of those offensive players has got to be a running back. So I've been trying to think about what team out there.
What if it was the Titans? And it's like, yeah, we'll give you Julio Jones for a first-rounder, A.J. Brown, and Derrick Henry.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Hey, Arthur, I'm now blocking your number. It was good to know you, Arthur. Thanks for working here, but you are now
Pound
blocked.
sand. Yes, go somewhere else.
But, like, could it be like one of those running backs with the Ravens and like a Hollywood Brown or something like that?
Maybe.
Like if you're the Ravens, because here's the thing. Like seriously, for most teams, that sounds laughable, right? But if you're the Falcons looking at the Ravens, you could say, hey, you give Lamar Jackson Julio Jones. You just drafted, at receiver too. Like you're trying to help. You have multiple good backs. What about a Dobbins and a Hollywood Brown, young players on rookie deals? But you get this star, which could take you guys to the next level. That's my guess. I don't think anybody else that's been thrown around there has like the players and the situation that would fit, that would actually make it viable to even discuss it. So that's my guess. In fact, I'm going to – well, no. I was going to say I'm going to text and find out if I'm right, but then if I do, I can't tell you. I can't tell you if I am, so I'm not even going to ask. I'm just going to assume I'm right.
Okay, well, you can assume that you're right. I hear that, and that's just, that is still ludicrous to me.
I'm not saying it's not ridiculous, but, like, it's not even, like, I don't think you can even start the discussion with anybody else.
Well, but, like, to Charles's point, if you're the Falcons and your end goal in this is to get a first-round pick for Julio Jones – like, is that really the best way to go about doing it? Saying, yeah, we'll take a first-round pick, and by the way, give us 2 starting quality offensive players as well. Because to your point, I thought the entire point of doing this was to free up cap space. So if you're getting back 2 starting caliber players that are, in their late 20s, as Charles pointed out there, how much cap room are you saving at that point? Like, to me, that doesn't make any sense.
He said they're in their late 20s?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, then my theory's busted. Because, Dobbins and Hollywood Brown are both, like, fresh into the league.
I'll go back and check the tape. I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
All right. Yeah, no. Well, it's, again, to me, the whole give us a veteran back is as Jeff Schultz has talked about, is kind of like the Falcons willing to take some salary back in order to move on from Julio Jones. Again, dump that's, now they can get out completely in 23, but for the next 2 years, you're in a bind. Like Charles said, they've paid the bonus stuff. It's not a massive number, but I think it's a massive number for him, which also brings up the whole idea of Julio Jones wanting a new deal. Man, come on. At this point, look, you got to get everything you can get, but realistically, if Julio Jones ends up getting paid what he's under contract right now, he is winning big in this league at this stage of his career. I just can't imagine a team would also be willing to do that and give him more money.
Well, if that's the case and that ends up happening, like, don't you just at that point, the Titans aren't going to do that. I'd be floored if the Titans did that. So, like, if that's going to be what it is, start talking about Zach Ertz, because Julio Jones is not going to be here. That's the way I read it. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, they're just in love with Julio Jones, and they'll do whatever it takes to get him. But that has not been the way they've operated. I don't anticipate a new deal being a part of the fold for Julio Jones.
Well, again, so Josina Anderson and the tweet Charles reacting to was essentially a GM basically saying, like, what is this price? They're trying to drive up the price. So Jeff Schultz, who of course columnist for the Athletic in Atlanta and been a columnist in Atlanta forever,
friend of the show.
He responds to Charles's tweet, says, so hard to know what the Falcons are serious about in these talks or what's leaking out. or if they're going to come off this. But as I've stated before, I'd be stunned if they get a first. Second rounder has always seemed realistic. And I would tend to agree. It's just maybe they'll find someone to do this, but it sounds like a lot of whipping up the price artificially. And again, just because they asked a team for that,
Right.
I mean, again,
You can ask for a lot of things.
right. Send me Derrick Henry.
No.
Send me A.J. Brown. So you can now say they were involved in trade talks.
Yes,
There
you
were
can.
trade talks that involved Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown and the Falcons. That is true. That is not inaccurate to say the trade talks involved those players.
They lasted for less than a second.
Yeah.
But they were in there.
Yeah. Well, I like it, Arthur Smith. Get in there and mix it up, man. You're not just a play caller anymore.
It's amazing to think about. I mean, we talked about the Florio report report's probably not the right word, but the Florio piece talking about the general consensus is that people believe the Titans end up with Julio Jones and that a second rounder is the price. Like, if you get through all these different discussions and you're the Falcons and you're talking about a first-round pick, 2 players coming back, and you end up with a second-round pick and that's it, I don't know. Are you okay with that if you're the Falcons? Like, that may just be what you have to accept and move on.
And that's the downside. The upside of things like this coming out, trying to drive up price and everything like that. The downside is if you're the Falcons and you end up with just then like the fan base is like, well, I thought we were getting a first rounder and like a star player, right? So there's the flip side of the reality of it. So I'm with Jeff. I will be surprised if they get a first out of this, and I can't imagine a team saying, oh, you know what, we're also going to redo your deal, Julio Jones, because at 32, we think you got your best years ahead of you. No, it doesn't work that way in this league.
Go to theGameNashville.com to check out Nashville's best deals. This week, purchase a $30 Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House gift card for only $15. Try their award-winning pizza, 20-plus local beers, and drafts at all locations. It's the place to go to bring the family or come for pizza, beer, and sports. 4 Middle Tennessee locations, Bellevue, Murfreesboro, Spring Hill, and in East Nashville as well, which has a huge video wall. I can attest. I was there on Friday night at Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House. It was awesome. Get yours now at thegamenashville.com. You can check that out this week at thegamenashville.com. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the Titans and get more into their offense. How scared are we that the Titans offense could have some significant regression this year? And how much could Julio Jones maybe change that? We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Tuesday morning, discussing all things Tennessee Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Let's go to the text line. Ben on the text line saying, the defense will be better almost by default. The offense will be worse almost by default. We know what Shane Bowen is. The X factor will be the new offensive coordinator, and our kicking might actually get worse or better. We don't know. What do you think about that from Ben? And do you think that the biggest X factor with this team heading into this season is Todd Downing? How adequately can he replace Arthur Smith in the gigantic hole that he leaves behind?
You know, Ben, I got a sneaking feeling that the Titans are going to be better or the same or worse. I think it's going to be one of those three things.
It's probably a good call.
That is my guess. But in all seriousness, yeah, I think that the Todd Downing thing, if you want to talk about offensive regression and what losses matter most, it's close for me between Arthur Smith and Jonnu Smith, the Smiths.
Yes.
Because I just think that even with Jonnu Smith's lack of production second half of last season, I still think that he would have been a big part of the offense, maintaining things. You have a clear number one tight end that does a lot for you, the run and pass game, and he's gone now. But, I mean, Arthur Smith that's the big question. I think Arthur Smith was more than just a coach who took advantage of good talent. I think he maximized it and was very good as an OC. He's a head coach now. No coincidence there. So, a lot on Todd Downing this year for sure.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Frank texting in. Great spot with Charles Robinson. I thought his statement around Julio wanting a new contract was interesting. Everyone talking about his $15 million salary, but that's actually nothing compared to what he'll want in a new deal. Julio might as well keep his house in Atlanta this year.
Well, yeah, you can want that, but again, like at this stage of his career, I mean, it's worth a shot, man, but I just don't think you're going to find teams out there willing to pay you big money at this point. In this league, you just get cut and you get your bonus, and then you don't get a lot of what's on your deal. That's what happens in the NFL when you get into the 30s at every position other than quarterback or kicker, I guess.
Hey,
maybe punter.
Look.
Brett Kern, a lot of years left.
Maybe 2 for 1. They need a kicker as well, so maybe he can come in and do that. Who knows?
Hey, that's a thought too. If you're going to pay him that much money, he better do like two things.
Yes. So with that in mind, we talked about Todd Downing coming in. You've lost Corey Davis. Jonnu Smith is gone as well. And let's be honest, like to Ben's point on the text line, I think there is some room for natural regression. I mean, the Titans were a top 3 offense in the league a year ago. They had a 2,000-yard rusher. They had basically 2,000-yard receivers last year, and they did it without their left tackle for the most part. So it was pretty incredible what the offense was able to do last year. And really, looking no further than the defense they trotted out there last year, for that team to win the division was a modern-day miracle, basically, when it comes down to it. So, look, that's a high bar for Todd Downing and for this offense to have heading into this year. I think you've got to be kind of wary of some natural regression anyway. The question is, how significant will the regression be? And is it to the point where that makes a big difference in your win-loss total at the end of the day? Now, a lot of that also is going to have to do with how much improvement the defense has made on the other side of the ball. But I do look at this team right now with Josh Reynolds as their number 2 wide receiver, with tight end still a huge question mark heading into this season. Like, there's no way you can convince me, as this offense stands right now, that it's going to approach being as good as it was a season ago. I mean, you just can't.
Yeah, well, approach.
I guess that depends on what you mean by approach.
I mean, I think the goal for the Titans is, can the Titans be a top 10 offense?
Yes.
I think that would be, if you have that and you have defense improving to middle of the pack-ish, then I think you have a team that can really do some damage. You really do get into some of these situations where You just think about one matchup. You think about one game in the playoffs. Think about beating the team you have to beat. Who's the team you got to beat?
Kansas City.
Can you beat Kansas City? The Titans, you can do everything you want on defense, and you probably don't feel good about that matchup. You know,
Probably not.
I mean, you don't feel good about holding their score down. So you've got to be able to score with them. Get a few stops. I mean, you got to get a few. But that, to me, is why, I mean, ultimately in this league, very rarely in recent years have teams that don't have really good offenses made it all the way to the last game. There's been some teams with so-so defenses and great offenses that have, but you've got to be at a certain level offensively for the most part. So I still think the Titans could be a top 10 range offense without getting Julio Jones, although I would say that I think without Julio and without an established tight end, I think something has to be addressed in there. But there are things that, Darrington Evans, a lot on him. Just like on defense, there's a lot on Christian Fulton. Some of these guys they drafted last year that you need to be healthy and be key players. And there's still a lot of different things individually that can come through for you that can make things better than they might look right now.
So you buy what Charles threw out there that right now, today, if Julio Jones is Julio Jones we saw a year ago, he's still a top 5 wide receiver in this league. Do you buy that?
I would say a healthy Julio, like going into last year, I still considered it, Hopkins. Yeah, going into last year, you got Hopkins, you got Julio, you got Michael Thomas,
Devontae Adams.
You got, your guy, Devontae Adams. I think he's absolutely in the top 5 going into last year in my mind. Then he's hurt. Misses part of the year, hammy, back and forth, still has a pretty good year. If he's totally healthy right now, is he top 5? Like who last year moved clearly beyond him? I mean, obviously you have people like Metcalf in Seattle who are coming fast. You got A.J. Brown's coming fast. I don't think he's there yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because there are people that say, if Julio comes here, he's the number 2. I don't know if I buy that. I don't think it matters all that much.
Right.
But I think he'd probably be the number 1 here. No disrespect to A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would look at it like 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
And basically the defense will dictate who number 1 is. I mean, it would be a great situation.
Good problem to have.
Yeah, it'd be a good problem to have. But yeah, I still think he's if he's healthy, until we see him hit the cliff, and Charles brought up a great point. A.J. Green, we've seen him. He has fallen off it.
Yeah.
But
I feel like A.J. Green has always been hurt. That's been his story his entire career, is he's just been hurt.
Right. And ACL,
yeah.
He's had things that have probably accumulated, and Julio has not had – he's had bumps and bruises, but for the most part he's been pretty durable. So I think he's right there. Still as a top 5 until he isn't, which, of course,
could happen.
Could
Week
happen
1.
right after you pay him and deal a bunch for him. But that's why this is a gamble. I still think it's one worth really seriously exploring, as long as they don't actually expect a first-rounder and 2 good players.
I'll say this, and to your point, as long as the price is somewhat reasonable, if the Titans end up going and getting Julio Jones, I feel a lot better about the regression conversation we're having.
Sure.
This offense looks pretty darn good. Once again.
Doubt. And it's funny, too, when you talk about all these things and you hear about 2 high-level offensive players plus the first and everything. So then all of a sudden it's like, gosh, a second-round pick seems like a sweet bargain. What are you doing, J-Rob? Make the deal.
Just do it now.
Come on. How could you not deal him for a second? But honestly, I feel like it's worth taking a shot. I agree with anyone in this fan base who says, okay, you could be safer and probably be looking at 10-7 or something. See how I didn't even have to
think about it.
That 17-game schedule is ingrained now. Or is it worth something that you could really pay for it, but also it actually could give you a chance to go where you want to go right now?
When we come back, we will switch gears and talk a little NBA playoffs. The Grizzlies in the thick of things with the Utah Jazz. Also, why do people keep throwing things on the court in NBA playoff games? We'll get to that coming up next as well. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitch as well. Elijah, my called shot of the weekend had Memphis taking down the Utah Jazz in the first round. That it's not looking so good right now. Memphis down 3-1 after losing Game 4 last night, heading back to Utah for Game 5. Looks like it could be one and done for the Grizzlies in the playoffs.
Jazz are pretty good. And when they get those three-pointers falling, they shot 50% from beyond the arc last night, which is just mind-numbing. Then they're pretty tough to beat. They've kind of flown under the radar this year because they're not really the sexiest team. They don't have, Donovan Mitchell's a star, but they don't have any, elite-level superstars on that team. But they're one of the best shooting teams in all of basketball. They're incredibly efficient. They play fantastic defense. And it shows. They're no pushover, even though you have to make that case for them, even though they are a 1 seed.
I think I got lulled to sleep by how dominant Ja Morant was in the first 2 games, and I was like, man, he's about to take over this series. He's still playing okay, but yeah.
Yeah, and Mitchell makes it's no coincidence that the one game they won, Donovan Mitchell didn't play in that game. So.
Donovan Mitchell does unlock a lot of that offense.
He is pretty important to what they do.
Yeah. So, speaking of NBA picks, I don't want to gloat, guys.
Oh God.
Well, we'll hold off till weekend winners. We'll count it all up.
Well, it's a significant lead by you at this point. By the way, we didn't even talk about this on Friday, but Preds picked a click. You and the listeners finished tied.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even realize.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to think.
Johansson scored in the last game. That's who Kyle picked. So y'all both finished with 8. So we're going to have to figure out what to do on that coming up, too.
Good job, Kyle. Man, good job. What was my pick that day?
I think it was Duchesne.
Yeah.
That didn't go well.
That's why subconsciously that's why all show I've been campaigning for them to keep Johansson and move to Shane because I'd forgotten why, but that's why.
Preds picked a clip the last day. What have we thought of the playoffs so far in the NBA, and why do people keep throwing stuff on the court? Like we've had the Westbrook thing with the popcorn and the fans. Somebody threw a bottle of water at Kyrie Irving's head. Somebody last night ran on the court in the NBA. What in the world's going on with NBA fans at these playoff games? They've been cooped up too long?
Maybe is that what it is? Like it's just like I've talked about how when things are totally back to normal, I'm gonna go to the bar and I'm just gonna like put my face in the pretzel bowl.
Yeah.
Just all. I don't know. Is it just pent up aggression? I know obviously there's some back and forth. Kyrie Irving talking about the racism in Boston that he's experienced, and then you've got like Bill Russell saying, by the way, let me tell you a little bit about that. But I don't know, man. It's stupid, and the people who do it should just be they're getting these lifetime bans. Yeah. So I don't know any other way to deal with it. I heard some dumb theory that the NBA is too woke or something, and that's what it is. I mean, it's like a.
That's why people throwing popcorn.
Yeah,
and paying to go to the game.
It's a shortcut.
Paying a lot of money to go to those games.
Yeah, to say the least. So I don't know, but it's weird, and it's sort of how sometimes these things happen, and then it's like they sort of copycat on each other. Yeah. I feel like maybe a little bit of that's happening too. Yeah, and you do get a little bit of you get a little bit of screen time on ESPN as you're
being escorted out of the arena.
Well, then didn't someone try to run on the court too yesterday? Right? Yeah. Hey, every once in a while, you get like the naked fan out there running around the stadium, and then
that happened a couple weeks ago in a baseball game, and the guy was naked running on the field, and he was running away. The field tarp was out; it was a rain delay, and he dives headfirst instead of running away from the police officer like off the field, dives headfirst into the rolled up tarp and tries to crawl his way through the tunnel. It's an excellent video. You have to go watch it.
Might be the boldest streaking strategy I think I've ever seen.
I mean, it didn't work because he definitely got caught. But it was something.
Nice. I have to check that out.
It's quite the image. Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Heidi from Dixon texting in.
Finally.
Your Heat are stuck in limbo for a couple more years, Robby. It was not. I remember me telling you I had a bad feeling about the Heat and the Bucks series. That didn't go well.
So was that just a 1 year sort of like they kind of got it going together in the bubble, and they're missing. How far are they?
They're missing that one more guy. Like Bam Adebayo is really good. He probably would be best served to be a really good number 2 on a team that's going to compete for a championship.
Yeah, he's been very good.
He's really good. Jimmy Butler should not be your second best player if you're going to win a championship. So we'll see if they can figure it out.
How far are the Grizzlies away? I mean, I still feel like it's like one.
They need another guy.
They need a wing, right? They need
Father Time to kick in and get LeBron and AD out of the West.
Well, there is that.
They also need Chris Paul to leave Phoenix. They need him to retire. There's a lot set in place already in the West where it's just so loaded. They need,
Okay, so if you could pick
Steph Curry to retire, Klay Thompson never come back. Like it's just so loaded right now.
Yeah, that's fair. But I do like. I mean, look, I do like some of the young guys they have coming. I think Jaren Jackson. I know that he was kind of up and down coming back off the knee, but I think he's
a unicorn. That guy is perfect for today's NBA. I mean, I think he's already on the cusp of like stardom.
Right. So, to me, if you could give them one wing, wouldn't that be it? Like Dillon Brooks is a nice defensive player, but Dillon Brooks to me can't play that many minutes for you.
You need more consistent shooting from him too. I mean, the Desmond Bane draft pick or trade for that draft pick did wonders for them. But even though you added about a 40% 3-point shooter, they're still bottom 10 in 3-point shooting in the league, and you can't be a bottom 10 3-point shooting team and still pull off upsets in the West when you're playing against teams like Dallas, Clippers, Lakers, Jazz, Suns, teams that are just letting it fly and making them like the Clippers as a team shoot 41% from 3.
Yeah,
like
they've figured that series out, by the way.
Hey, that one's over.
It's 2-2.
It's over. Yeah, it's over.
Didn't you guys tell me it was over the other way on Friday?
No, I mean, and
was my
also
lock.
I want to
Got that
give
wrong.
Tyronn Lue had I'll give him some credit. Made an incredible coaching adjustment where you just throw some bodies at Luka and make other guys like penetrate your defense. Don't just throw Patrick Beverly out there and say, all right, let's not help off any of these
Just watch him get
shooters.
torched.
Yeah. So they're not helping off shooters now. They're making Doncic give the ball up a little bit, and other guys are having to create. Nobody else on that Mavericks offense can create for anybody else other than Luka Doncic. So that's kind of exploited a roster issue that the Mavericks have.
Hey, Kawhi Leonard's got a player option after this year. Maybe he'll go to Memphis.
See, but that
Like, I
doesn't
feel
solve
like-
the problem.
But I feel like that's
I
what
mean,
it's
he's
gonna
a great
take.
player, but it doesn't solve the problem, right?
Oh, it solves the problem.
I guess now you all of a sudden you can guard any wing in the league.
Yeah, it solves
That
the
helps a
problem.
lot.
You
Yeah.
get to the line whenever you want. Yeah,
That would solve
helps.
the problem. They'd be pretty good.
It would help. It would help.
I feel like that's what it's going to take for them to take that next step. I mean, obviously, John Morant, he's going to get older. He's going to get better. But I still feel
He's
like
got to.
it's going to
shoot
require
more.
him attracting somebody in free agency.
Right.
And I don't know how realistic that is in a market like Memphis. We've just not seen it before.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what it's going to take.
They got, they were like a player away with that last group, right?
Yeah.
With Zebo and those guys, and that's kind of where they're trending toward now. But Ja could also hit more threes. That would help.
He's starting to do that a little more now.
starting to do it a little
He
bit.
did.
Because teams are just going to do what Golden State did, and they're going to give him 5 feet, 6 feet of space.
And then in the game when
just
he
let shoot
hits
every
them,
time.
Golden State's cooked.
Yep.
But
'Cause then you have to
gotta be
guard
able
it
to do
close.
that more often.
How closely have you followed the NBA playoffs? Apparently pretty closely, according to your, weekend winners record.
I mean, Joey the Greek knows what is going on, okay, in the NBA playoffs. But yeah, I mean, like NBA and NHL, there's always a game that I want to watch on. So it's almost too much of a good thing, especially when you're fighting for the remote at home and stuff like that, But I make the case, hey, I'm talking sports on the radio tomorrow. I have to watch this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
How about Russell Westbrook last night? They avoid the sweep. He has 19 points. He was 3 of 19 from the field. He ended up with 19 points.
We will
Made
never see a point
made 3
guard.
shots.
We'll never see a point guard that is so good at giving other people the ball, yet still has an atrocious shot selection problem.
3
That's a
of
good
19.
We'll never see that again. I mean, guys that rack up
19
assist
points.
numbers, the assist numbers are that good, don't shoot 3 for 19 because they know that if they're shooting that bad, to not shoot the ball 19 times, or in some cases 30 times or 25 times.
Well, and the thing is, it's 19 shots, so he got 19 points because he got to the line so much.
Yeah.
So it's actually way more shot attempts,
Shot like
right?
30
Yeah.
times. Yeah.
He's fun to watch
He is fun
and
to watch.
infuriating at times.
That does it for us today here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll be back 6 a.m. tomorrow. Darren Donick and Chase is coming up next. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.